So Spirit Gym really is about learning the principles by which we wake up and how to use them. And so we can be a co-creator, but so we can learn and grow and be a little more creative each day, have a little more freedom each day, and add more life to life. Because if you really realize who and what you are, then you realize the importance of doing what you love to do. Because if you're doing what you love to do, you're making love every day.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then you're experiencing more God every day, because love is God. Love is the verb of God. If there's one thing that really has kept me in my career for over 40 years is that there's a lot of things I could do to make money, but I always knew that I felt the most whole inside when I was helping other people live their dreams.
Welcome back to the Medicine Podcast. My name is Mimi, and you guys know who is sitting next to me, my beloved, my king, my husband, Chase.
What is going on, everybody? We are back on the Medicine Podcast, and we are at our studio away from studio, our home away from home, up at the Rainbow with none other than the myth, the man, the legend, our dear friend, our greatest teacher, Mr. Paul Chek. Welcome back to the Medicine.
Thank you. It's so funny when you say the myth. I'm like expecting to go stand in front of the mirror and disappear.
Well, we one of the things you talk about is creating your own myth. So you've done that for yourself, creating the myth of Paul Chek's life. And I will say for our listeners, I hope you all have listened to or watched our first episode with Paul. It is by far the most downloaded, the most watched episode that we did last year. It has since sadly gotten taken down on YouTube. So we're gonna be good little boys and girls on this episode. I think we said the V word one too many times on that episode. Unfortunately, it is down now, but we will have a great conversation despite all of that. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that we have this opportunity again to sit down with you and learn from you and gift that wisdom to our listeners. Last time they just gobbled it up, so we're really, really excited.
We're stoked. I think you mentioned even at the end of our episode over a year ago, this project that you've been working on.
Yes,
and this program that you've been working on. In fact, as long as we've known you, in 4 or 5 years at this point, you've been talking about this.
Yeah.
And we're here. Now's the time. And so today is this really beautiful introduction to this life's work, really, that you've been manifesting for so long, called Spirit Gym.
Yes.
And I was using the analogy earlier. We just got back from Italy. We spent time at biodynamic wines and vineyards. And when we would visit these these vineyards and these wineries, we would sit down and we would pull some samples off of from the place itself, and we got to taste and experience a little bit of the biodynamic abundance at these facilities, and that is not unlike what we get to do today.
Yeah, good.
Spirit Gym is near live for anybody and everybody who's interested, and hopefully this conversation today can be pulling a few bottles down from the shelf, giving our listeners a little bit of a taste, and of course leaving more to be desired, and we hope that everybody joins us. But with all of that, Paul, maybe we can just give a quick context for what we're going to be talking about today. What is Spirit Gym? What was your intention for this? And then we can get into some of the principles, as well as what I think will be important, which is layering in a little bit of your story before we get going.
Yeah.
But just to lay the foundation of what we're going to be talking about today, what is Spirit Gym? Why now?
Well, I started doing the research of basically compiling all what I did originally. I started 10 years ago. And I reached a point in my life as a person, as a teacher, as a therapist, where I realized that it doesn't matter how fit physically a person is. It doesn't say anything about their emotional intelligence, their spiritual intelligence. I have sort of a running saying I use. It doesn't matter if you can squat 1,000 pounds if you can't get along with your wife and kids.
Right.
You know, because I see so much on the internet and the media, social media, all this fixation on how strong you are, how many backflips you can do, or how
and
many,
probably your own clients through the years.
well, well, I've worked with tons of elite X Game competitors, Cirque du Soleil athletes. I mean, I've worked with the best athletes in the world for my whole career, so I've seen how extreme fitness and strength can get, but I've also seen how you end up with a lot of what I call fit, sick people.
Yeah.
On the inside, they're unhealthy. Their relationships are broken down. They have what Jung would call an archetypal possession, where, in this case, the athlete archetype, but it can be the businessman archetype, the entrepreneur archetype. But an archetypal possession is when someone's so totally possessed by what they're doing that they sacrifice themselves, they sacrifice their spousal relationships, their responsibilities as a parent, their responsibility to family, to friends, and anything that gets in the way is just pushed out. They're kind of like a drug addict just searching desperately for the next fix, And they also often don't realize that they have become so possessed with their drive to accomplish and to be acknowledged that they lose a sense of the value of rest. For example, I used to have lots of professional tennis players that would come from all over the world to see me because they were completely burned out and their bodies ached like hell and they had chronic tendon problems all over, whether it be patella, Achilles, posterior tibial, wrist flexor, elbow, tennis elbow. And what they would do is they would play the U.S. circuit, and instead of having an off season, they would go into South America or to, and basically they just never stopped moving. So they would go from one season to another season with no winter, no rest. And so I kept having to work with these guys and say, look, you guys are completely frying yourself. But the point I'm driving at in essence here is I came to the realization that it did not matter how good of a program I wrote somebody. It was the issues of behavior and changing their routine and getting them to realize that they had to have a dream bigger than themselves. Because if the dream was only limited by themselves, in other words, if they couldn't see how the dream was not only for them but for their family and for their whoever they felt it was important to share with, then there wasn't enough levity to overcome the gravity of their program behaviors and their unresolved traumas. And I know very well how this goes because, as we can get into later, my own childhood, but for example, my father never once told me good job until I was 19 years old. I'll save when that happened for our story, but so no matter how hard I worked, no matter how good I did in sports, it didn't even get one acknowledgement. So I actually, when I joined the military, one of my driving reasons for joining the military is I wanted to go somewhere where I would actually get tested and then get acknowledged for the outcome of my performance, and it would be objective. There would be no wishy-washy. It was like, you don't win, you don't get the reward. If you don't, demonstrate proficiency, you don't get the reward. So the point I'm driving at here is that I see so many athletes and people that are desperately trying to get the attention and the sense of value of themselves and a sense of meaning and a sense of belonging through what they're doing. And so these things drove me very, very strongly as an athlete, because it was as though I was getting what I didn't get from my father every time I could win something. And I was proving to myself that I was valuable and that I was useful and that I was capable. Because when you grow up as a child, and I had a lot of teachers that told me I would never amount to anything. I failed reading in the 3rd grade and almost didn't make it to the 4th grade, had to go to summer school all summer in a reading school to just make it to the 4th grade. And, I was a kid that had a lot of energy, and I asked questions that teachers didn't want to answer or couldn't answer, and I got in trouble a lot, and I got in trouble in church for asking questions, and so I felt that as I'm working with patients over all these years, I'm watching all these patterns, and I realized over and over again, here this person's come to me often in severe pain. I mean, people, I'm famous for medical failure, so people come from all over the world when nobody knows what to do with these people. Some have 30 or 40 things wrong at once. I mean, everything you can imagine, we call the kitchen sink.
Right.
Everything's going wrong. And most therapists and doctors don't even know where to start. In fact, what they do is they usually say, it's all in your head, because they can't believe anyone could have all of these problems, hormonal problems, neurological problems, structural problems, digestive problems, eliminative problems, psychological problems, relationship problems, crisis in the family, crisis in their life. Where do you start with a person like that? And so I look into because I'm somebody that does not like to not succeed.
Right.
I went about my therapy the way I went about my athletic endeavors. And it was also very important to me, people paying me a lot of money to do a good job. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not the kind of guy that just says, well, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, you're going to have to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like, okay, I've got to figure out why that's happening. My number one question as a therapist has always been, what's causing that? And I keep looking until I get to an impasse where I go, okay, if this one thing is resolved, it'll cause a domino effect. And that domino effect could free this person. And I realized that people's libido, their life force energy, is caught in these unresolved traumas. It's caught in these insecurities. And I saw that people were dangerously externalizing their sense of self. So
in this little cup, I have my favorite way to enjoy mushy love, which is in combination with cold milk. We drink raw cow's milk, and I put it about 8 ounces of milk in with about a scoop and a half of mushy love. That combination, like the cold version of mushy love, tastes like liquid graham crackers. Like, I shit you not. And if you don't know yet what mushy love is, it's our mushroom elixir with 500 milligrams of chaga, which is amazing for gut support. They call it the king of mushrooms. And then 500 milligrams as well of tremella mushroom, which is the beauty mushroom. And she is most known for holding 500 times her weight in water. The more hydrated we are, the more plump and dewy and fresh and young our skin looks.
Plump and dewy.
For Mushy Love, go to getmushylove.com and you can use the code MEDICINE for a nice little discount that we only give to our Medicine podcast listeners.
I can give you a perfect example. I had a professional hockey player come to me that needed my help and was in trouble. And I was, at the time, my office was on the second story of the building I was working in. It was in my institute in Vista, and I could see the parking lot from my office. And he pulled in a twin-turbo Porsche Carrera that's at that time probably $150,000 to $200,000 car. I mean, wow. It's the high-end, tricked-out Carrera. And as I was coaching him and teaching him what he needed to do, I noticed he was eating all commercial food, junk, and had no sense of diet whatsoever. I said, look, we got to switch you to certified organic food or you're not going to heal. And he looked at me and said, I can't afford that. I said, I knew how much he was making. He was making $4 million a year.
What?
I said, dude, you're making $4 million a year. You're driving a $150,000 to $200,000 car. And you're telling me you cannot afford organic food. I said, what the fuck's going on here? I said, you better sell your car and get a moped if you have to so you can eat food, or your career is going to be over soon, because you're not going to recover if you keep eating this crap that you're eating.
Right.
I said, there's no such thing as saving money on food. I said, where the hell's all your money going? And he said, well, I think he said he had 4 houses. He had a car and toys at every house. He had multiple women that he was, loving,
taking care of, probably buying things for.
And he said, I'm maxed out. I spend every penny I got to manage all this stuff. And I said, well, so what's the point? There's the externalization of the self.
Yeah.
See, he sees his success in his car and in his houses and his toys. And, it's like hockey players love to dress really well, and they're always comparing cars and dicks and sticks and everything else, and women, motocross racers. That this is very common.
I think that's the professional athlete in general.
It's common, across the board. The women aren't quite so bad, but they have their share of problems too.
Sure.
Mostly that they masculinize themselves. But what I'm really trying to point out here is, as I realized, I have got to get to what's really driving this crisis of self. And I identified early on in my career that all behaviors, which are choices, ultimately, behaviors and choices, are the products of beliefs. And so, I've been doing this for 41 years now. So I started looking carefully into their profile, and I have a very comprehensive intake form, probably the most comprehensive in the world. It takes people about 8 hours to fill out the intake paperwork because it asks everything. I mean, I want to know the history of your family, your injury, your in utero experience. You might have to call your mother. I mean, I have to know this because I can't get to the real issues if I don't. And there's a lot of testing that I do on their bodies, and I can read their energy fields, and I have those abilities. So I identified so consistently that it almost always went back to some belief about what God wanted, what God expected. I mean, I could go on a long discussion of all this stuff, but what happened was I realized that we've got to expand our understanding of a gym, because we go to a physical gym or we go to sports conditioning to build our bodies, to get stronger, to look better, and we attempt to feel better. But I've worked with many of the top bodybuilders in the world and most beautiful athletes in the world who are very insecure, who are very, have a lot of neurotic tendencies and behaviors, who have a lot of unhealed trauma, who are often not aware that they're really trying to achieve something, either to get mommy's approval or daddy's approval. And I saw that a lot of the belief systems that they had about sex, and most of them were Christian. And as you know, a lot of these elite athletes have quite a sex life.
Right.
And a lot of them are married. I've had athletes pull out 4 different phones, set them on the counter, and I've seen this multiple times, and I must say the basketball players are quite the champions, right up there with the rugby players. And I'm like, what are all these phones for? What are you, fucking James Bond or what? and I've actually had men hire me because they knew I lived a multiple partner relationship. This is before I had 2 wives, because I have always had a multiple partner relationship since Penny, 28 years ago. And so they would actually hire me, and part of the reason they hired me was they want me to teach them how to do this better.
Right.
And in every case, they were married and concealing these other women. So each of those phones was for one of their partners, and they all thought they were going to get married to them. And they often had houses separate with them in different locations, and they're like living these very complicated lives. I'm like, how in the freaking hell? I said, God forgive if you get drunk, because if you make one slip, you're dead.
Right.
And I said, you must think your wife is stupid. You men do not understand women. I'm like, and some of them, I said, their wives are Christian, hardcore Christians. I said, when your wife finds out, your life is going to be over, because love turns itself inside out, and as much as they love you, they will want retribution for you lying and deceiving them, and they find out this has been going on for years. I said, I'll teach you how to do this. You do it honestly. My wife always knows who I'm with. I don't keep any secrets from Penny. I never have. I love her. I respect her. We have an agreement with each other, and our agreement is what we abide by, and that's how you do it. And they didn't want to hear that.
Right.
No, at all. What am I saying? I'm saying that It doesn't matter how good I am with food, stretches, exercises, joint mobilizations, manual therapy. I can stretch your nerves. I can mobilize your joints. I can make your body feel good. And in 2 days, you'll be as screwed up as you ever were because you're holding on to all these psychological withholds. You're keeping secrets from yourself. You're keeping secrets from your wife. You're keeping secrets from God. You got this in the closet, got that in the closet. And all that psychic energy builds up in the body. And metaphorically, but very realistically, you create on the inside a physical representation of what you have in your mind. Mm-hmm. So if you have insecurity in your mind about maybe your sex life, then you hold the energy of insecurity in your pelvic girdle. And so the symptoms that manifest as problems in the pelvic girdle are the physical manifestation of the energy of insecurity. Okay, so insecurity is not a stable energy. So someone who's got a lot of insecurity in their pelvis will often have problems with SI joint dysfunction, pubic symphysis dysfunction, lumbosacral dysfunction, because the system can't stabilize itself. People who are rigid with ideas end up having rigid regions of their body that correlate directly to the chakra system. It's the chakra system. The Hindu chakra system is very, very accurate. That's why I use it. I mean, it's when you've seen thousands of patients, you see this going on day and night. It's like a broken record, you know. And so I found myself, in order to help people, I had to talk about their emotions. I had to talk about their wounds. I had to talk about their beliefs in God. And I found myself over and over and over again having Bible passages thrown at me and, you know, well, why are you still in a marriage when you're not happy? Well, I tell death do I part and my Christian vows. I go, yeah, well, you know, what are you teaching your kids by staying in a marriage where the two of you sleep with your backs to each other? You're not happy. You're arguing and fighting all the time. You're teaching your children that's what a marriage is all about. So they're either going to reproduce that and you're going to then have problems for the rest of your life because your kids are always your kids, or they're going to be scared to death to have a relationship because they're going to think it's painful like mommy and daddy's is. And I say, so, and what are you offering God with all this? You know, you think God's really getting off on all your
right.
poor me story?
Yeah,
And so I found myself forever having to take people deeper into their understanding of scriptures that I've had, not just Christians. I've had people from Islam. I've had people from many from Judaism. I've had Taoists. I've had Buddhists. I've had almost everything you can think of. I mean, 41 years traveling the world, you know, working with elite people from all over the place. I've run into every damn story you can imagine. And so I found, okay, I've got to really help people learn to identify what it is that's causing them to believe in this way and to behave in this way. And, you know, what is it that you're looking for? And you know, why are you so resistant to seeing God from a broader perspective? And so I would see the programming come up. Well, that's what I was told. That's what the Bible says. Okay, so I would do things like this. I'd say, here's a poem written by Rumi. Read it. Tell me what it means. Then I'd hand it to someone else. Read it. Tell me what it means. They'd say something completely different. And then I'd read it, and I'd say, okay, here's what it means to me. And they'd look at me like, how did you get that out of that? And so the point I was making is, you can't read Scripture word for word because it's metaphorical, it's allegorical, it uses analogy, and without a long discussion, I would show them there's 4 levels of scriptural interpretation, and they're at the lowest level, which is literal. The highest level of scriptural interpretation is inspirational, which means it should inspire you to live and love more fully. That's the highest level. The second highest level is allegorical. The next highest level is the second from the bottom. The bottom is literal. The next highest level is ethnocentric, which means my group against your group. And look, it always amazes me that to this day you can find this research on the internet easily. There's 45,000 branches of Christianity, all claiming to have the legitimate teachings of Jesus. So there you see that the literal translation can be chopped up 45,000 ways, and these people will fight each other over this. They will hate each other in the same religion. And this has been going on for thousands of years. And so I found that belief systems are absolutely dangerous to a person's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health and development, and that most people haven't got a clue what they're reading. And I love quoting Shankara, who said, no man can understand Scripture until he's enlightened. And when he's enlightened, he doesn't need Scripture. And so I asked these people, after I say this to them, I said, how many of your Sunday school teachers, pastors, preachers, bishops, or even popes are actually enlightened? And almost everybody agrees, none of them. Okay, good. Well, what would it be like if you had someone take my CHEK Level 4 manual and get somebody who's in their first year of CHEK training to try to understand that? They wouldn't have a clue what they were doing because it takes 5 years to get there, and you won't understand how to use the information. So I saw that there was just constant confusion, and so many of these, as you know, preachers and Sunday school teachers and pastors and ministers, they are so full of their belief that they're right, and the hell and the damnation and the, the hard line. And I used to lease, Penny and I, when we owned 2 buildings in Vista, we had 26,000 square feet. We leased 6,000 feet to a Christian church. And interestingly, on a huge banner in front of the church, in giant block letters, it said, fear God. I'm like, okay, fear God. Okay, well, why are you afraid of unconditional love? Why are you afraid of the source of everything, which is you? Why are you afraid of what's living inside of you and breathing through you, without which you could not even be here? And I would be sitting in my office on Sundays working and researching and hearing these sermons right through the wall. And it used to just shock me that people are actually sitting and hearing this stuff every Sunday and believing it. And I would see, and then when they would let the church out, I would see all these obese people come out. And I was repeatedly having to go to the pastor because they would open their car doors and throw all their garbage in my parking lot. And I was repeatedly having problems with people parking in the handicap spot that were not handicapped, so they could save 20 feet to go to church and worship God. and I saw this going on, and I see it going on all the time. And so this is my roundabout way of saying that I had to study all aspects of psychology. I had to understand world religion. I had to understand philosophy. I had to understand depth psychology. I had to understand human physiology, anatomy. I had to understand the science and studies of consciousness. I had to study behavioral change. And I basically, it just dawned on me one day that people would be far better off if they understood that just the way we go to a gym and we meet the resistance of weights, and we have to overcome inertia to grow, to stress ourselves in positive ways to grow our body. We need a system of understanding for realizing how to work with emotions to grow, how to work with our thoughts, our beliefs, how to use your mind, how to think holistically instead of being gullible and programmed, how to ask better questions. We have to have a clear distinction between religion and spirituality. We have to have a sense of why we're all here and what we're doing here. I saw that people needed a framework of understanding so that they could learn the principles of dreaming and manifestation, learn what love really is and how love works and why love is so important in relationships and how that relates to mind and what mind is. And I ultimately said, okay, I did what I do always. I say, okay, I got to find the fundamental principles, right? Like my 4-doctor model is my synthesis of years of study of saying, okay, what do you have to know to be a healthy person and have well-being? Because you can be healthy physically but not have well-being. You can be a mental genius but not have a healthy body. you can be physically fit but be psychologically and sick on the inside. You can work yourself to death making muscle and strength, but have burnt out adrenal glands or a dysfunctional digestive system. So I found the fundamental principles that you have to be aware of in the 4 doctors, which we've talked about: Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, and Dr. Movement. So I found with my patients, if I did not have a system for identifying what was happy making for them and are they doing it, then they would never be happy people. And I've worked with many billionaires. At one time I had 6 billionaires flying jets to see me at the same time. I've worked with countless millionaires and multimillionaires. I've worked with some of the richest people in the world, and they're no happier than the poor people that come to me through work comp, who are Mexicans barely making it.
Yeah. Do you hear that, everybody? Everybody listening?
Yeah.
Like, perk up.
They're not any happier.
Right.
In fact, oftentimes I found that the money is a big stress for them, because the more you have, the more you got to figure out how to protect it. Mm-hmm. And the more worried you are that you're going to lose it. And so some of them are obsessed with making more. Mm-hmm. And I had a guy that was a patient of mine for a couple of years. He owned 50,000 commercial real estate properties. I think he's in the top 10 wealthiest men in the world. He's in his late 70s, and the guy could not stop working. I mean, 7 days a week, constantly traveling around the world, hardly spent any time with his family, his kids, and this has been a habit forever. Chronic low back pain, chronic neck pain, just all this stuff that just goes on and on and on. But I'm like, okay, here's a classic example of someone who really needs to understand life a lot better, and these 4 doctors. So this is my long-winded but short-winded way of saying, through all this experience and needing, partly out of my own pride of doing a good job, not out of just wanting to help people, but like taking a challenge and saying, okay, it's my job to figure out why is this person. I mean, I've had many people with 2 medical files that are bursting at the seams, that have gone to 30, 40 doctors and every kind of chiropractor, osteopath, acupuncturist, and spent sometimes $1 million on surgical procedures and therapists. And I look through all this, and you see everything is just oriented to the physical body. And I look at these people's lives and their injury and trauma history, and nobody's taking time to look into this stuff with them. No one's looking at their diet. I'll give you a good example. I had a woman come to me who was the wife of a medical doctor who had severe hypothyroidism. Her hair had all fallen out. Her fingernails had all fallen off. And when I did my analysis on her diet log, she was drinking 25 cups of coffee a day and been doing this for over 10 years. She was the manager of her husband's medical practice, and she'd been to over 10 medical doctors with severe hypothyroidism. Not one of them said a word about how much coffee she was drinking. She told many of them, they said they didn't even think that was a factor. This woman's adrenal glands were probably about the size of an atom by now, if she even had any. And I addressed that with her right away. And she said, I've brought this up over and over again. Nobody thinks it's at all involved. And I'm like, and so I explained it to her, and she's like, how could they overlook this? And, without going into that, but the point is that I'm taking these as challenges, and it all kept boiling down to beliefs and the behaviors, and that boils down to childhood programming and education, which is indoctrination in most cases, and unhealed trauma. And it just became clear to me, we have got to see our emotional life as an opportunity for growth, like a gymnasium, and our mental life and our religious or spiritual life, or our beliefs, which is part of the mental system, but a lot of these beliefs cross over into what we would call religion or spirituality. And because 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation, there's hardly anybody that I would see as a therapist that did not have some kind of a religious belief system in place, hardly any of which had ever even looked into these things to see if they were true, or if there was, other interpretations of Scripture. I mean, right here, I've got probably 15 different Christian Bibles, and you can pull them out passage by passage and put them side by side. and many of them do not say the same thing,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can even show you through history that the same passage has been rewritten in many cases, Isaiah 45:7 being the big one, because they hate that passage. I create the light and the dark, good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So they changed it so it didn't say that, because they didn't want God to be associated with the devil. They wanted to make sure somehow the devil was of its own creation or some magical thing, which, always leaves a problem, because that means you got two gods. So who created them,
Yeah.
But these are like questions I asked as an 8-year-old. And people aren't asking, and they're ruining their entire lives.
Yeah. I want to pause there, because I know that there is probably someone listening who was maybe in my shoes about 5-6 years ago when I started asking deeper questions and wondering deeper things. And that place it can be for some people kind of scary, because
scary. It is.
You're literally slowly turning like almost like 1 degree a day. For me, at least, I'll speak to my experience. It was like 1 degree a day away from everything that I had known in quotes, or thought, believed about God, about spirituality, about Jesus, about, me and how I fit into all of that. So it can be a really scary place. And until someone has an impetus, if they are not naturally curious like you were with these questions at 8 years old, and life is good, they have community, and they go to church on Sunday, and they see their friends, and they feel good, and they get a motivational speech, and they leave and they get a donut and a coffee, and they leave and they feel good-ish. They feel good.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of impetus to inspire change when things feel good. And so I just want to pause and highlight and recognize that, because that was me. And until my life got uncomfortable in the way of a divorce, and really like doing some measure of self-reflection, and just only studying Jesus's words in the Bible, not the whole thing, just like, okay, let me just look at what he actually said and try to figure out what I believe about this. And something you said earlier, I want to highlight. You talked about fear God, and it made me think of the sentence that was kind of the nail in the coffin for me with Christianity. Chase, when Chase and I got back together, I was still like dabbling in Christianity and still identifying as a Christian kind of. And I was like, let me check out this church. I won't name the church, but we went to this big church in San Diego. And this was my first time here. And the pastor, was kind of a celebrity pastor, ex-pro athlete. Don't know how he just like walked into this job, but he had a full house. And he said towards the end of, or about the middle, he said in a very threatening tone, "You don't want to be on the wrong side of an angry God." And I was like, whoa, because I had been studying Jesus's words for the last year of my life only, not listening to really like preachers of this kind. And I was like, whoa, that is not, we serve, we identify, we love, whatever you want to say, two different gods. Like that is not who I want to be. This is not the religion that I want to be a part of. All that to say, that was the nail in the coffin for me to continue. That was an impetus for me to start asking deeper questions and like, what do I actually think? What do I actually believe? So I just wanted to pose that, because there are certainly people listening right now who are like dabbling, who are starting to ask deeper questions, and it can be a scary place. And I just want to say, I see you, I hear you, I was you. And it doesn't mean that you're ignorant. It doesn't mean any of these negative things, but if you are feeling nudges of impetus, of curiosity, that's your intuition. That's your soul speaking to you. And I am so grateful that I listened to those nudges.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to paint that picture, because I know that those people are listening right now.
Well, it's a universal thing. I mean, when we're children, we don't have an ego. So we are completely open to whatever comes into us, at us, and through us. If you study the unconscious, you look at research in hypnotherapy, and a good hypnotherapist can get information from when you were 3 years old that you have no conscious memory of at all. And so what they find by putting people under hypnosis, and plant medicines do this too, because they unlock the ego so the unconscious can pour up into the consciousness, is that people have the ability to remember everything. I mean, every sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, it's stored. The unconscious is extremely powerful. Bruce Lipton says it's got 1,000,000 times the processing power of your conscious mind. And so a child is in full download mode. And this is very strong till about 7 years of age, and then the ego starts taking on more. They get more and more of a sense of self progressively. I could go through all sorts of stages of brain development learning, but it would just make this conversation more complicated than it needs to be. But the key thing is that about the first 14 years of a person's life, which would be the first 2 chakras of development in the 7-chakra Hindu system, we're being programmed by our environment, and that is a necessary cultural interface that has to happen. We have to know what we've got to know to fit into the time and the place that we're born. We've got to know who our people are. We have to know what is expected of us as a male or a female, or a child, or ultimately a husband or a wife, or we have to know where our place is if we're working in a business or on a team or in a job, because there's a structure to culture, or it would just be chaos, right? And one of the main functions of religion originally was to hold the culture together, so it just didn't become piracy and just everyone killing each other and taking, and that's what the virtues are for. That's what morals are for. So they're actually systems for guiding the flow of energy and information. That's what commandments are. That's what morals are. That's what virtues are. They're actually energetic structures. Okay, and so and that's how our shadow gets created, because as the person becomes enculturated, if you look at any of the religions and see what their dictates are, be it commandments, be it precepts, the ways you're supposed to behave for whatever the God is, or whatever the beliefs are, the religion is, what you see is that there's a certain criteria, a code, let's call it, of what you can do and what you can't do, and what the ramifications of that are. And when you look at all the world religions and say, okay, what is the beliefs about sex? Not only in the religion, but in the sex of the religion. SECTS, not the sex of religion. There's plenty of that too, but swept under the covers.
Yeah.
What you find out is the indoctrination process pits people right against their instincts. So especially a young man, your instinct as a young man, your body says, wow, look at that beautiful girl. Let's jump her and make some love. The instinct is to plant your seed as everywhere you can. That's the drive of survival. That's beyond mind, right? There's no mind involved, right?
There is no mind involved.
There's no mind involved. That's why they say a stiff cock has no consciousness, but the thing is, then we have our instincts to dance, and our instincts to express ourselves artistically, and our instincts to move our bodies, and our instincts for foods that we're called to. And we have our instincts for creativity. We have our instincts to poop, to pee, to breathe, and to love. And now you go lay a bunch of religious books on the table and say, okay, what do they say about sex? Well, you'll find not only are they different, but they have a lot of restrictions.
Yep.
How about what art you can look at? How about what music you can listen to? How about the way you dress? How about the way you take care of your hair? I'll give you a good example. When I was probably 19 or 20, I got a job working at a machine shop in Florida, went to trade school when I was young. Maybe I was 20, and the owner of the machine shop, which was a Napa Auto Parts, but we did full rebuilds on engines, and I was trained to do that. And one day, he starts telling me what I can and cannot read on my lunch hour, and and to get the job, I had to cut my hair and have my hair short like a military haircut because he's a Christian, and that's dirty. You look like a dirtbag hippie. And I'm like, I needed the money, and I wanted to do the job because I prefer to do that over some of the other jobs I could get. And back then, I was into racing cars, so it was like it fit my mindset. Well, one day I'm reading a hot rod magazine at lunch, and he tells me you can't read that shit in here. I'm like, we rebuild engines here. I used to race stock cars. I was a sponsored motocross racer. I mean, that's why I work for you. I know what I'm doing. And you're telling me I can't. So he was imposing all these rules on me. And I'm like, this is the kind of shit my dad used to do on me. Different kinds of rules. But I'm like, I'm not going to let a guy leverage me over money to what I can read and how I have to wear my clothes. I cut my hair for this asshole. That's enough. And I finally just said I said, look, if you are going to keep telling me what I can do on my lunchtime, which is my private time, then I'm not going to work for you. I don't care. I can get a job anywhere. I'm not afraid of being out there looking for a job. And he said, it's my way or the highway. I said, fine. I just put my stuff down, grabbed my shit, and walked out the door. I said, send me my check. And I left. But you see, this is the enculturation process. This is pitting you against your instincts. Like, I couldn't use my own instinct to creativity. For me, expressing my creativity was building high-performance cars and engines, and I was good at it. And I was being limited on even looking at that. You think I was looking at Playboy the way he was behaving. And God forbid if I would have brought a Playboy to work or a hustler, But so the point I'm driving at here is that we go through this enculturation process, which is necessary because we have to be able to interface with the people we're with. But there's something coming here that's very special. And it's going to your question. You see, what you're asking me is what about all these people that don't really know any better, and they're going to these nice talks, and they're motivated, and they're getting their coffee and their donuts, and they've got their tribe. But I also have to ask you, how do you feel when you're told that you can't touch your pussy? How do you feel when you're told that you can't listen to certain music that you like? How do you feel when you're told you have to dress a certain way? How do you feel when you're told you can't have long fingernails like that? And that list just keeps getting longer and longer.
Oh, I grew up that way. I went to a private Christian school, and although they said with their words that it was about building a relationship with Christ, I learned from a very young age that actually my worth and value to God was dependent on what I looked like on the outside. If my shorts were long enough, if my dress was long enough,
yep. Right. Your high heel shoes,
what my neckline was within 4 fingers of my collarbone. I couldn't have rivets on my, I couldn't have a slit in my skirt. I couldn't wear heels above a certain, I know it very, very well, and it was awful.
Yes. Okay, so there's something coming up here what I'm building up to, okay? So first, take note. Let's go back to the table full of books from all these different religions, and let's ask ourselves one key question that's very Spirit Gym oriented. What does the word God mean?
Are you asking us?
Yes.
What we grew up with was male father in the sky with white robes, long gray hair.
Basically like daddy wizard in the sky that sometimes grants your prayers and sometimes doesn't, but has a grander picture in mysterious ways.
Okay, let's go deeper. How many gods can there be?
Well... In reality,
unlimited. Unlimited in the sense that we can create what we want to call God from anywhere. But the great mystery, the great undefined, the force behind this experience as God's definition is what I tend to not even subscribe to, but live through.
If God is God, then there can only be one.
That's the whole point.
Right.
God is that for which there is no other.
Yeah, there you go.
Because anybody who's even slightly curious asks, what caused that?
Yep.
Where did I come from? Where did the world come from? Where did the galaxy, where did the universe come from? Where did it all come from? Capital A, where did it all come from? Well, if you have a Buddhist God, a ground of being, and you have a Taoist God, and you've got a Christian God, a Muslim God, you've got a Islamic God, Allah, and they all claim that God is the highest power. Well, we have a fundamental problem here, because if you lay all the rules and dictates, none of them are the same. And isn't it interesting, your three Abrahamic religions, which are monotheistic, all have different qualifiers, different descriptions, and different demands of the one God that they claim to worship. So what we have here is a collection of myths. We have a collection of stories, and it shows you the power of a story to commandeer your mind, and it has been used for thousands of years to control people and pit them against their instincts, to keep them in a state of fear, to keep them controllable and keep them profitable. And as long as you scare people to death to think God is scary, then you're going to be very scared to die, and then all they're going to do is hang this carrot called, we'll kill you if you don't behave, and religions have been killing people for not following the rules for a long time. And so what you end up with is a bunch of people that are scared to death, but don't keep asking the question, well, what is God? Okay, so God is that for which there is no other. And not to get lost in the question, because I've got your question in mind, we're getting to the point here. So you have people that are programmed into all these beliefs about the God that they have been exposed to. And that becomes the source of fitting in, meeting the rules, because you're still developing your sense of self. You still need tribe to have safety. Take a child to a large shopping mall and separate it from its mother, and it'll scare the hell out of the kid.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because it's like it's in another planet.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Okay, so until the ego forms, and one of the functions of the ego is to differentiate self from not self, want from don't want, do from don't do, should from shouldn't. So the ego is actually the nexus of self by which one perceives itself in relationship to any other. So until a person reaches the level of ego formation, they're square in the child archetype. And so what you've got is adults. Ken Wilber says 70% of the world population right now is still in the child archetype, regardless of chronological age.
Yeah.
And so in the last 4 years, we've seen what happens when people turn to daddy figures to make decisions and try to fit into a group to feel safe. It gets you killed. Okay? Or badly maimed, which is worse than dying in many cases. So the answer to your question directly is you're dealing with a very real issue, and that is that the powers that control religion and use religion politically and for social engineering, and have done for a very long time, do not want you actually becoming an adult. Because an adult has to think for themselves. An adult understands the responsibility of the necessary independence of making your own decisions and doing what you got to do to take care of yourself, your family, and meet your responsibilities. And an adult realizes that there's consequences to their choices, but an adult is not somebody that's going to let you push a medical procedure on their children, or tell them what sex their kid's supposed to be, or what foods their kids should and shouldn't eat. They're going to make those decisions themselves because it is their responsibility. And those people are hard to control because they have reached a level of discernment where mothers think carefully before exposing children to food, to movies, to video games, to whatever it is. And that means they're not so easy to sell on stuff that shouldn't be included for the benefit of the parents and the children. And so people stay in a state of unconsciousness, because if you start asking questions that oppose the belief system, you get attacked. And it's scary for someone in the child archetype to be attacked, because it's the same as ostracizing the child.
Yes.
It's the same as segregating the child.
Yeah.
And so we've got 70% of the world population that's still in the child archetype that hasn't asked honestly, is it really true?
Right.
Is it, like, how many people going to these churches and temples and synagogues have ever sat and thought, how could there be one God, yet all these different gods that fight and war and will kill you and will get you in trouble even in your own religion? Because that's a fundamental question. Those are the questions I began asking at 8 years of age. And when I asked those questions, I did not get a warm reception.
Right.
I got things like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk. I got, children are not supposed to ask questions. They're supposed to listen. Do what you're told to do and stop talking. That was the theme of my entire childhood in churches and in schools, except for when my mother joined the Self-Realization Fellowship at age 12, and we began studying Yogananda's teaching, and I could have time with monks, and it was what saved me, because they answered all my questions, and they did it lovingly, and they shared anything that I wanted to know about, and I went, oh my God, there's actually hope for a being. Because prior to that time, I thought I was on a prison planet, and I used to walk around asking God, what the hell did I do to get here? Because how can I be asking questions that adults are not asking? And these are very scary things going on around here. And, so this hovers back to something very important. We've lost what used to be our rites of passage. We do not have a structured system for rites of passage where women become women ceremonially, and they know they're women. Women, as you know, traditionally became a woman through being pregnant and the responsibility of caring for herself and making it through pregnancy and giving birth, and then having to endure the pain of birth, which can kill a woman, as we know. And men had to go through a very carefully planned rite of passage ceremony to become a man and a warrior. And those rites of passage ceremonies were designed to, shall we say, extinguish the childlike dependence on mommy, daddy, and others, and to be willing to sacrifice your life for the tribe. So you had to go from I-centric consciousness, the kid, mommy, I'm hungry, mommy, I'm tired, mommy, I want to play, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, to I will do whatever I've got to do to protect my people. And there's rules, there's a code of conduct, there's a system that we all live by, there's a mythical structure we all live by. We know who our enemy is, we know who we are. We don't have that anymore. So now we have all these lost young men in the world that don't know who they are. They're still living at home at 35 years of age playing video games, and then they don't want the responsibilities of women. The whole thing, and Leonard Sachs goes into this, MD, like Leonard Sachs MD's books are shocking, and they're very true. And so what we now have is we have 70% of the world population that is afraid to ask those questions, because until you're ready to be on your own and go out into the desert and survive, which is the territory of a warrior, you are afraid to answer those questions, even if you can get the answers, and you're afraid to ask them because just asking them can get you in trouble.
Right.
I mean, if you want to start a fire, just walk into a Christian church with a Buddhist book under your arm.
Right.
Or any other scripture. I am a jealous God, thou shalt not worship any other gods before me. Okay, well, first of all, what kind of God is jealous? Because if God is God, there's nothing here but God.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no other gods except the ones that God dreams up for fun.
Right.
So when you start looking at these things, you can see these are like bedtime stories you tell kids to indoctrinate them, because mommy and daddy are surrogate gods. they're the ones that control your whole life.
Yeah.
They have the power to destroy you and the power to love you, the power to feed you or starve you, to punish you or not punish you. They can, so whatever a child is taught about God is also projected onto mommy and daddy, because they're the gods that are standing right in front of you.
So true.
Okay, so these things are very, very real, but then I'm going to bring you to the punchline now. Okay, so here's the punchline. In Spirit Gym, because there is nothing but God in actuality, that for which there is no other. This is why I love the first principle of Sufism, which is the mystical branch of Islam. There is no God but God. I worship everything and everyone. Well, hallelujah. Somebody finally woke up. I guess you need to just dance in circles all day like the whirling dervish, just to spin the shit right out of you so you can wake up. Rumi was a whirling dervish. He started a branch of the dervishes. Rumi himself said no man can get to God until he becomes a heretic. He said you got to stop reading books.
I feel that.
God is not something you memorize. It's an experience.
Yeah.
It's the experience of life. It's ultimately the experience of love. And so this is me edging up on the punchline. So you see, a child has got to build a mental structure.
Yeah.
We have to learn mathematics. We have to learn manners. We have to learn how to fit in with a culture. We have to learn all the things that it takes to navigate a life. We got to learn what's hot and what's not hot. What'll burn you? What'll kill you? What'll cut you? What is it? Kids have to learn. You don't just jump in someone's car. In fact, you shouldn't just eat anybody's candy on Halloween because people put razor blades in there and do crazy shit. Kids have to learn how to navigate the matrix we call culture. So that matrix sets up a field of resistance. Now we have to go to the fact that consciousness, by definition, is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. You cannot know good without evil.
Yep.
You can't know wet without dry. He without she.
Yeah.
You cannot make meaning without complementary opposites.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you say, okay, well, how many good guy, bad guy relationships are there through the Bible? Hundreds and hundreds of them. How many are in any religion? How many religions have a devil or some surrogate of a devil? Oh, almost all of them.
Right.
Okay? So if all this is God, then you have to say, well, what is all this crazy shit for? Why would God plant all this crap in your head? It's not that God's doing it. It's too deep to get into it in 10 seconds, but excuse me 1 second here for a sacred moment. Sharing a puff with all of you here. Some tobacco, herbs, and essential oils, and a little moment of God. Okay, so ultimately, if God is that for which there is no other, now we're getting deep into Spirit Gym, and quite frankly here, God, as unconditional love, if you have to give that as a symbol, it's zero. Mm-hmm. Because that's the only symbol that represents no conditions. Mm-hmm. Okay? And zero, by definition, is no thing. It's not nothing. Because God is not nothing, or what's the point of having a God?
Right, yeah.
What, right? We don't need to be hobber on that too long.
Yeah.
Obviously, God is something, or God wouldn't be inherently in us. We're all looking for what created us. We're all looking for what created everything, right? That's just an instinct we have. Like, how did that happen?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what myths are. They're attempts to explain the unexplainable. Okay? A myth is something that's never true, but always true.
Yeah.
It's
a story that tells itself.
It's the story that tells itself. It's something that never happened, but is happening all the time.
Yeah, I love that.
Like when you really understand what a myth is, it'll slap you upside the head and wring your brain out and clean your ears and make you go, holy shit, man, this story is deeper than frickin' deep. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the point I'm getting at, though, is God as unconditional love, and that's the highest form of love. So God is the highest of the high of everything. God's got the most intelligence. God's got the most awareness. God's got the most power. God is everything, right? So God is ultimately infinite. There's nothing higher than the infinite. The absolute is just the infinite of all infinities, okay? So what's the point? You can't have a mind when you're no thing, and no thing is simultaneously everything. We know everything's here. It's called the universe. So paradoxically, zero, by definition, being no thing, has no border, no barrier, no boundary, no definition. So where is it? It's everywhere. So somehow zero manifests everything from within itself. Let me share this with you guys. I'm so sorry. If I drop over dead, you know I'm your minor bird. Okay, so the point is, you can't have a mind without a duality, because you have to be able to make meaning of something, or what's the point of having a mind if you can't make meaning? Right?
Yeah.
How would you know who your mother is and who your father is if you didn't have a duality to make a comparison?
Right.
So that's the principle of the two. That's two steps removed from God. So God cannot be thinking existence into being, because before two you have one, which is being itself. It's the totality of everything. And as a man who's had a lot of samadhi experiences, which maybe you have you ever become one with everything?
Yep.
Well, there's no thinking going on.
Yep.
It's a holy fuck experience. It's like it's beyond words. It's beyond thoughts. Okay? So you say, okay, well, being somehow came before mind. How did that happen?
Yeah.
So what's left? Dreaming. Because we dream at night when we're unconscious. And dreaming is ultimately the emptiness of God desiring something to relate to, because God, by definition, is utterly alone.
Yeah.
There's nothing there for God to relate to. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says it this way: the Tao is the equivalent of God. All things have their back to the mother. He says the Tao is deeper than deep, blacker than black. It is older than God. What's he saying? God is an idea in people's minds. Yep. Okay? So what he's saying is there's nothing behind God. There's nothing behind the Tao. Okay? So imagine if you were all alone, utterly alone. How would you have an experience of yourself except to look into yourself and dream yourself into existence? So God dreams itself into existence, and this is beautifully encapsulated in many myths, but my favorite one, because it does such a great job of really telling the mystery very well, is the myth of Shakti and Shiva from Tantra. And in the myth of Tantra, Shakti, which is the divine mother, which represents God's energy, the flow of God's energy in consciousness, dreams her consort, her lover, her husband, and her friend into existence, called Shiva. Shiva represents that which is manifest. Shakti represents the womb, the emptiness of God. It is out of her desire for companionship that she dreams Shiva into existence, and the two of them have children, which represents every living being in existence. Spirit Gym is existence itself. Okay? So once God dreams Shakti into existence, now he has this divine feminine to relate to, and he looks at, this is all myth, it has to be. God says, oh, you're so beautiful, I love you. And she is in love with God, but because God is no thing, there's nobody to make love to. So paradoxically, her sense of consciousness within herself is God's sense of consciousness within itself. You understand that? Yep. Her ability to perceive can come only by way of God. That's what a soul is. So God is the soul of souls. So Shakti's being is an expression of God's being, but her desire is what causes her to dream for relationship. So God's desire caused her to come into being, and God's desire is expressed through her, the divine feminine, to have a partner, which is the divine masculine, and Shiva is the equivalent of the Christian God, the God of all things, right? The God of everything, right? So the two of them make love, and out comes the universe and everything in it. Okay, so Shakti in quantum physics represents the implicant order, the enfolded, invisible, immeasurable order of spirit. Spirit is the flow of energy and information. It's God consciousness.
Like ultimate potential.
Its potential is God itself.
Okay.
Okay, so this goes to the handle of Spirit Gym, but if you think of Taoism, you got the Tai Chi symbol, but if you look into good textbooks on explaining Taoism, that Tai Chi symbol is circled with a circle of dots, and that's non-being. You can't have being without non-being, or being wouldn't make any sense, okay? So non-being is significant because it is aware of being. So it is what's witnessing its own creation. God is not, paradoxically, God is the source of everything, but is not caught in it. God's always beyond creation. There's always more than creation. That's pure potential. So this is what I call big C in Spirit Gym, big consciousness. It is what's aware of every phenomenon. It's aware of what's dreaming. When you all of a sudden realize that you're dreaming, that means there has to be a part of you that's conscious of the dream, but isn't in the dream. Because if you were 100% infused in the dream, you would not even know that there was a Mimi to have the dream, right?
Right.
Isn't it true that at any given moment while you're listening to me, you can be aware that there's something in you listening?
Yeah.
And if you go deep enough into yourself, you ask yourself this question: who is looking through my eyes?
Yeah.
Who is listening with my ears?
Yeah. Who is the ultimate observer?
Who is feeling with my senses? And those are important meditations to do, right? So you're basically, what I'm sharing with you here is that our capacity for perception is what is called the I. When you use the word I, you are actually talking about the subject of you. If I ask you, Mimi, what is this that I'm touching?
It's my hand.
My hand. Who's in possession of the body then?
Yeah.
Because if you say this is my hand, it means you're in possession of a body.
Yeah.
It means that's not really who you are. The person I want to have a conversation with is the woman saying that she owns the hand. Because that's Mimi. Because if Mimi loses that hand, I can still have a conversation with her. We can keep chopping parts away.
Yeah.
And we can have just a little stump here we can get to a head even. And I'd say, what am I looking at? And you'd say, my head. I'm like, who's the my in there? That's the subject of you.
Yeah.
The point is that God is the subject in all of us. That's the unmoved mover. That is the divine eye you see on the capstone of the dollar bill floating above the pyramid. And that's the divine eye. So God's sense of subject, of perception, is in all of us. Okay? It's in all of us. So the point that's really important here is that God's dreaming itself into existence because God is all alone. And God wants to experience itself. And one of the big questions that I had to meditate on for quite some time is I ultimately had to say to my soul, I need you to connect me to God because I want to hear this directly from God, even though I trust my soul is God within me. And that's what a soul is. It's God inside of you. Only God can create a soul because the soul is the subject within you, right? When you're talking about your soul, you're talking about who owns this hand. It's your soul's body, right? And so ultimately, I said to God, if you are unconditional love, then how in the hell did all these conditions get here? Because a universe is a limitation. Uni means one verse, song, one song. Why do I have all these limitations? Why are all these rules here, right? And I got an answer back from God, which was quite powerful. God said to me, Paul, I must create conditions so that I can love myself unconditionally. Because if there's no conditions, how can I recognize myself?
Yep.
If there's no body, I got a question for you. If I could make your body disappear in an instant with a magic wand, where would you be?
In another dimension somewhere, not on Earth.
Well, you'd be everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Yep.
So paradoxically, our soul, our sense of self, is God embodied. And so you would be one with God, which is everywhere and nowhere at the same time, which is why Plotinus says the soul's greatest addiction is to matter, because without matter, it cannot see itself and it can't relate to itself. So the problem is souls fall into matter and they fall in love with it because they're so enamored by it. Look at me.
Look at
wow.
me. Yeah.
Look at all these sexy parts that feel good. Look at, the food. So it's like, toys. Oh, I'm alive. Right? And so the soul just gets completely and utterly just addicted to matter. And the whole story of alchemy is the extraction of spirit from matter by becoming more conscious that you are not matter. And matter itself is a symbol for God. It is an icon. It is something that points to something else. It points to what's inside of it. It points to what's creating it. So matter is how God embodies itself, so God itself can say, look at this. I have hands, I have toes, I have mountains, I have river. I'm a star. In fact, let's do this a lot because it's so fun. And so the next thing you know, boom, we got stars and we got galaxies and we got beings and we got trees. And this is all God going, oh my God, this is so fun. It's amazing. And so God's favorite game is hide and go seek. Right? And God's got all the time that'll ever exist, so there's no rush to become enlightened, because what do you do next? You got to dream up another friggin' game.
Yeah.
Okay, so you see, God creates conditions so that it can love itself unconditionally. God dreams itself into existence so it can experience love and relationship and say, I am. Okay, in the Bible, when Moses was talking to the burning bush, Moses said, who are you? And God said, I am that I am. There's lots of ways to interpret that. I am that I am. I am that I am. No matter which direction you point at something, that's God. I am that I am. I am exactly like this. I'm a fire that can magically appear and disappear. And interestingly, the bush did not get burned.
Right.
That's divine fire. That's not physical fire. Okay? That's fire beyond fire. So in Kabbalah, the top of the Kabbalistic tree correlates to the fire element. So the first act of creation is divine fire, which is all fire is full of desire. You don't feed the fire, it goes out. And then you got the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its tail, one of the most ancient symbols there is. What's the symbol say? God has nothing to eat but itself.
Right.
And if it doesn't eat, it can't sustain its body. And if it overeats, it kills itself. So if it undereats, it dies. If it overeats, it dies. And there you have the Tao. Not too much, not too little.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so now let's go through a few key steps and we'll make a circle. God is that for which there is no other. God cannot be thinking itself into existence because that's 2 steps removed from God. But everything has to be here before, because you can't have a mind without a relationship. All minds are sending information between 2 points of sentience. What would a mind do if it had no place to send information? See, if you, Chase, do you have a mind?
I do.
You do. Do you have a mind?
Yes.
Good. You said, I do. Okay, so you see, you're in a relationship with your mind.
Yeah.
If I say, Chase, what are you thinking about right now? You can tell me. Because there's an I that's thinking about something. So there's a mind that's in relationship with something. Well, your mind creates the illusion of separation from your body so that you can say, I'm thinking about. Because if there's no about, then there's nothing to relate to. You get it?
Yeah.
If you took the word about out of every sentence, it would be kind of hard to make meaning out of anything. If I say, what are you thinking about? And you said, I'm just thinking. Well, what are you thinking about? I'm not thinking about. Well, then that means you're not thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see the point? So the point I'm making is mind itself is utterly dependent on relationship. So mind, an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information, that's what a mind is embodied and relational. Okay? Now let's go back to the dream. God dreams itself into existence. The desire is Shakti, and the desire to have relationship, Shakti dreams Shiva into existence, and they make love. Love means relationship. It's the basis of all things in the created universe are held together by love. That's what it means to have an atom with a proton, a neutron, and an electron that are in a relationship. They're hanging together, right? This table, everything in existence is held together by God's love. God's relationship with Shakti is love. God's relationship with Shakti and Shiva, because everything in the dream is God dreaming, okay? So the point being is when Shakti dreams Shiva into existence, the first thing she does is, "So you're so beautiful, my love." And he says, "Oh, my darling, you're so beautiful." Now you have a flow of energy and information between 2 points of sentience. And so what do you find out? First you dream, then you have a relationship. I'm dreaming. When you become sentient in the dream, it's called lucid dreaming, you say, "I want my beautiful lover." And presto! And what do you find out when you're on 7 grams of mushrooms? Whatever you think about manifests
Sure does.
instantly at the speed of thought. And you got to learn to manage your mind, because you can make as many devils as you can make gods in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And they'll rescue you and they'll eat you alive, right?
Yeah.
So there you see the power of dreaming and mind, because dreaming makes mind. You can't have something outside of consciousness. So big C, God, is dreaming, but because God, non-being, is aware of being, that part of God is the part that is having the dream, which is the part of you that says, "This is my body," that says, "I'm thinking." So God dreams itself into existence, and all these characters in the dream wake up and go, "Oh, Chase, fuck, you're my buddy. You're such a cool dude. Mimi, oh, geez, I love you. You're so gorgeous. I'm so impressed I dreamed you into existence." Or did Chase do it first? I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But whoever did it, we did a good job, right? Chase, oh, you see the point I'm making?
Right.
We're all dreaming each other into existence. Why? Because that's how we have fun. And this is how God realizes what it is, okay? So now we're really getting somewhere here, because now we know that God's dreaming, because God is that for which there is no other. We know that God is infinite. We have to ask ourselves a very important question. If you're God and you're infinite, what could you do with infinite amounts of energy, infinite amounts of information, infinite amounts of creativity, infinite processing speed, infinite processing power, and infinite potential to create anything you want? Would you limit yourself? Or would you try every possible thing to figure out what the hell you are?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course you would.
Yep.
Because there's no limitations on these infinities, and they're all infinitely curious too. That's where God's desire comes in. So then we say, well, what is love? Love, the L of love, stands for life. And if you don't have the desire to live, you don't live. You'll die. You'll commit suicide. People that don't have the desire to live don't live. They stop living. How we know myths from many things. People will commit suicide when they lose their desire to live. It's very well known that when elderly people especially lose their partner after 35, 40, 50 years of living together, very quickly the other one dies, because there's no desire to live without their beloved. So they die because they lost their desire. Paradoxically, but interestingly, to the degree that we desire, we will. L, my desire. O, the potential of God to create. VE, volt electron, the electromotive force, will. The electromotive force in the universe is what makes things move. Okay? Every atom is held together by the electromotive force. Okay? It's one of the forces of physics. So you see that love is a code for life. The desire which draws potential from source and produces will. So love is like a jet engine. The harder it sucks, the harder it blows. The more you desire, the more you will or manifest. Okay? So God's love for itself is ultimately what produces the relationships and the characters within the dream. But once they start recognizing each other in the dream and sharing information, now you have mind. Okay? So in order to have meaning, you have to create conditions and limitations, because if you don't put a limitation on energy, you cannot identify anything as this or that. So the laws of physics are the limitations on energy that create the matrix within which we have self-perception and love and relationship. Okay, so back to your people in church that go for their meetings. They're just unconscious. They're kids wanting to get along with everybody, wanting to feel safe, but they haven't started asking the big questions. And what happens is, when someone programs your soul with a mind, it inherently begins to feel uncomfortable, because the soul is ultimately total freedom. The soul is ultimately God.
Right.
So the deepest desire of the soul is unconditional love, but it can only recognize itself through the conditions that God creates so that it can love itself unconditionally. So buried inside of us is this desire to know who and what we really are. And so we start off with a mind that is programmed into us through relationships, so we can say I am and have desires and go about getting it and learn and grow and ask questions. But inevitably that mind starts to hurt. Geez, I can't have sex the way I want to have sex. I can't listen to the music I want to listen to. And so the pain teacher shows up to say, hey, ask a bigger question. Because guess what? There's a lot more to God. You're still a newbie. You're just a baby with a mind. Learn to ask bigger questions, because minds are made for questions. Without questions, what would a mind do? Right? That is, remember, mind and love are the same thing. Because if you don't have a desire, there's no question to ask. And if you don't have will, there's no way for spirit to flow to answer the question. And all questions are God questioning itself, because there's nothing here but God.
Right.
So now we have this interesting paradox. We come into the world unconscious. We develop a mind through enculturation. Our mind pits us up against our instincts, against other people, which is the rest of God, and we get confused about why is the rest of God so mean to me? And we think, well, that can't be true. People must be confused, because why would God torture itself? Well, the only reason God lets this go on is because every time you're in pain, you start asking questions. And so what do? You got to wake the sleeping God up. And so it's a beautiful booby trap. And the booby trap is, whenever you're not learning the truth, it starts to hurt.
It's so true.
And whenever God says, I want to know the truth of myself. Because I can't buy into a lie. Because that's not me. Right? And so we find that if there comes a time in everybody's life, it's called a midlife crisis. If you wait too long, or the dark night of the soul, these same people you're talking about wake up one day and they're 40, and they still are afraid of their genitals. They're still afraid to listen to music, and they now have a whole closet full of skeletons, because nobody can pit against their instincts and the urges of the soul. God knows this is all a big game. So that in the deepest part of you, you're just playing a goddamn game, and the game is to figure out who you really are, because without the game, you cannot become conscious of who you are. Right? So I'm getting to the punchline, but I want to make sure you understand the steps. Okay, so you reach a point where you say, okay, I got to make decisions for myself. I'm tired of being pushed around. And I'm tired of worshiping a God that doesn't friggin' love me unless I follow all these friggin' rules. And there's got to be more to God than that, or it's not that intelligent of a God. I didn't want to marry a CEO. of a corporation. I didn't want to be born into the military and be told what I can and can't do every hour of the day. That's not freedom at all. So there's, inherently we sense there's more to God than we can get with our limited ideas. And so the pain teacher comes and says, hey, you better ask better questions. And why should I stay married to someone that doesn't love me anymore? You better ask a better question.
That's a big one in religion.
How can Seventh-day Adventists only eat vegetarian, or they're not following God's rules, but they're Christians and I can eat meat? And so you start asking bigger questions and you say, wait a minute, I got to figure this out for myself. That means you're becoming an adult. Well, congratulations. Okay. And so this keeps going on. And then you say, well, those Buddhists, they seem to be calmer and more centered than a lot of us Christians are. I'm curious, what did Buddha have to say? And you open up a book of the Buddha's precepts and you go, wow, this guy had his shit together. Then you read the Tao Te Ching and you go, I'll tell you what happened to me the first time I read the Tao Te Ching. I said, holy hell. In 81 verses of poetry, this guy addressed everything that's the most important in life, and in a way that doesn't deny anybody, that rings so true in your heart, it hits you over the head like a sledgehammer. And the first thought I had was, why 1,000 pages of God will burn you in hell and terrible stories and absolute and utter abuse of women and wars, and the list is long. And in 81 verses, some little old man from China nailed it bullseye, and it's a lot healthier for you. And I went, okay, good. Now we're getting closer to God. And they are smart enough not to use the word God because of all the problem that creates. That just increases your chances of getting killed. And so you get a little bit closer and you go, wow, now I can look at the Bible after reading the Tao Te Ching and say, well, that passage of the Bible, I create in the light and the dark. I create good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. It has to be that way because I'm the friggin' Lord. And the devil, I need the devil too, because the devil is the one that gives me free will. So I don't get stuck in all these damn rules. And the devil can be evil too. Yes, the devil can be downright evil. Well, that's the destructive nature of creation. And if you don't learn to manage the destructive nature of creation, then you don't create very effectively, right? Look, if you don't think that you use the destructive nature of creation, I'm going to ask you to ask the chicken before you eat it, what are you going to feel like when I chew you into little tiny bits and drop you into a vat of hydrochloric acid and break you down into proteins, fats, and carbohydrates and turn you into my body?
Right.
And the chicken's going to say, get out of here, asshole. Right? But we forget all about that. So there you see, you're using destruction for creation all the time.
Yep.
You want to build a house, you got to cut some trees down.
Yep.
Should I keep going? Destruction is inherent to creation. Evil is destruction taken too far, usually for an emptiness deep within the core of an individual, which almost always comes from a traumatic childhood, and it is an acting out against. Atheism, researchers have shown that most atheists, interestingly, have daddy issues. And they are rebellious against a patriarchal God that wants to control you. Because what is it? It's a projection of the daddy image. So they hate the daddy image, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a God like that. So atheism really paradoxically, it's a more enlightened form of looking for the truth, because it says, I don't want to have a relationship with a God that's dysfunctional, abuses you, will burn you in hell while telling you you're being loved. Who the fuck wants to sign up for that? And so it's just a big story. Yes, it is. It is a story. It's all a story, every bit of it. And the story is designed to have checks and balances so that if you get too unconscious about it and start believing things that aren't true, it hurts.
Right.
And you start asking bigger questions. Okay, now here we come. Dun, 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 dun. Then finally you start reading different religious books, and your view of God and life and yourself expands.
Yep.
And you go, oh my Jesus, this is amazing. And you read the Hindu scriptures and you hear Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman. God is soul and soul is God. That means I'm God. How did I do that to myself? It means God is in me, but it also means God is in everybody else. And you think, well, how in the hell did that happen? Right? How did God do that? How is God in everybody? Well, let me see. What would happen if I took 1 billion flower pots and filled them with water and went out on a full moon and looked in every single flower pot? What would you see?
1 billion full moons.
1 billion full moons! That's because God is reflected in all of them. And it doesn't matter how many flower pots there have, that one moon shows up in every one of them. So God is the consciousness reflecting itself in every being, just like the moon reflects itself in every pot at night, okay? Or the sun bounces off every ocean and every stream. And so all of a sudden you start realizing yourself and you go, wait a minute. I couldn't be here if I wasn't breathing all this air. I'm breathing 25,900 breaths a day. Where'd that come from? Well, then you do a scientific analysis and find out, guess what, boys and girls? You're breathing atoms from Jesus' body, from Krishna's body, from Buddha's body, from outside. You're drinking atoms. You're drinking their piss, too. I mean, this has actually been investigated mathematically and scientifically.
Right.
So you say, where'd my food come from? Out there. Where's the air coming from? Out there. Where'd all the molecules in my body come from? Out there. Okay, well, they came from the earth. Yeah, but where'd the stuff of the earth come from? Oh, the sun. Well, where'd the stuff in the sun come from? Stars from all around it. Where'd that come from? Stars from all around it. Well, when does that end? Never. Okay, so what do you find out? If you go physically, it took the whole universe to create you. The entire universe conspired to create you so you could have a body for your soul to dance in. So God could pretend to be Mimi and pretend to be Chase, pretend to be Paul, and come to this damn costume party and play hide and go seek and just think it's the greatest thing in the world. Yeah. And the more you forget about God, the more exciting it is when you figure it out. And God goes, oh my God, that was amazing. It was the best trick I ever did on myself. Shit, it took me 14,000 lifetimes to figure it out. Fuck. Cool. Let's try it again, because I got nothing but 14,000 more lifetimes to keep creating. Okay, so you ultimately start having the realization that who and what you are is bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what spirituality really is at its essence. It is a connection to a progressively larger whole. So you realize, wow, I couldn't be here without my mom and dad. And I wouldn't really know who I am without my friends, my family, and my teachers. I couldn't be here without the water. I couldn't be here without the fish that I eat, and the birds that I eat, and the animals that I eat, and the plants that I eat. And they couldn't be here without the planet. And the planet, we couldn't have life on the planet without the moon. If the tide stopped moving, everything would die. And if we didn't have any sun, nothing would live. So I couldn't be here without the sun, but the sun couldn't be here without the galaxy. The galaxy couldn't be here without the super galaxy. And the super galaxy couldn't be here without the universe. And the universe couldn't be here without God. Because you have to have something to make something. There has to be some source of potential. And so this is called the positiva path to enlightenment. You keep learning more and more and asking bigger and bigger questions until all of a sudden it slaps you upside the head. And what happens is you start having mystical experiences. You sit there and contemplate, and all of a sudden you experience yourself as the whole world. And you go, wow, that was scary as hell. What happened? Then you start having experiences of yourself as the whole universe. A samadhi. And you go, Jesus, Murphy, that's mind-blowing. Okay, so here's the punchline. First, you got to build a mind so you can ask questions and do your investigations. But then ultimately, you become more and more like God, and you blow your mind. Yeah. So Spirit Gym is where we build a mind to blow it. That's what we do here. First, we learn why we're here. We learn why we go through all this indoctrination process and why we have to go through all these stories. Because we're ultimately playwrights, we're co-creators, we're authors. With God says, hey, now that you're in the dream, what can you come up with? It's your turn. And when you're sound asleep, you just keep believing everybody else's stories. But when you wake up and say, okay, God's in me, that means I got the pen too, damn it.
Yeah.
That's enough of this vegetarian shit. I'm hungry.
Right. Yeah.
And it's enough of this, hands off. If I can't get laid, I'm going to do it for myself. Right. And I'm going to be a happy person instead of a grumpy person on antidepressants all the time. And so, the beautiful thing is as you learn more and more about the truth of yourself and the truth of God, you realize segregation and isolation and all this religious division, it's third grade.
It's silly.
It's third grade. It's for kids.
So silly.
But what's it for? It's to build a matrix in your mind because you have to have a sense of self-reflection. And ultimately, paradoxically, you got to know what God isn't so you can recognize what God is. And the devil is the symbol for what God isn't.
Yeah.
Right? God isn't what wants to torture you. Now, paradoxically, God is the devil, but God had to create the devil to get you home. Because if you were just too happy eating fucking grapes and drinking wine all the time and money just fell out of the sky, you would stop growing and you wouldn't ask the big question, who am I? You say, I'm too busy being stoned and eating donuts to ask these questions. But when you go through a divorce, the donuts and the grapes don't do the trick.
Yep.
In fact, you get empty inside. And when you lose your business or you lose a limb or you get a serious disease, you start asking bigger questions. So the whole thing is set up so that as soon as you start getting passive and not contributing to God's own evolution, because look, here's a paradox. Can God know itself and the truth of itself if you don't? Isn't that amazing? You see, because it doesn't matter what I know about God or what I've experienced about God. That's just a story to you. God has no meaning until it has meaning for you, because you cannot take responsibility, nor can you have anyone else's experience. You understand this?
Yep.
So it doesn't matter how vast God is. Until you know God, God cannot be known. And because it is God that's the seed of knowing within you. God is the seed of conscious within you. God is the soul within you, the entelechy, the guiding principle that ultimately wants to go on the hero's journey to know itself and to truly, genuinely love itself. The devil is critical because God does not want to be loved by a robot. I mean, how much of a relationship can you have with a blow-up doll? She always says yes. She's got no personality. That's not real love. There's no satiation in that. That's the problem with pornography. It's pseudo-eros. It's not real love. It's empty, right? So it never fulfills the soul. Love always comes with responsibility. A lot of people that are in love with porn don't realize they're avoiding the responsibility of being a co-creator with God.
Right.
They don't want the responsibility of a relationship.
Or the responsibility or the pressure or the
risk of
work,
rejection.
The risk of
failure.
rejection, the work of going out and meeting someone and putting yourself out there and possibly getting
Which
shut
means
down.
you're a child with adult sex organs.
Yep.
You want the freedom of a child and the codependency that somebody else will take care of you, but you won't have to do the work of being a daddy, a mommy, or a lover. Right? So it's essentially a byproduct of the enculturation of keeping people in the child archetype to keep them controllable and passive so that they don't become awake enough to say, screw you, I'm not doing that. I'm not following your rules. And the worst thing you can do is kill me, and I'll just go back to being what I was before. Love. Okay? So, this is far more magical and far more mysterious than most people's imagination can grapple with. You see, when you talk about the qualities of God, you're dealing with infinities. How do you get an infinity out of God will burn you in hell for touching this or doing that or eating this or drinking that? That is such a drastic limitation on God. It'll choke you to death. It'll suffocate the soul. But you know what? If you want to get someone to do some work, choke them. If I hold your head underwater, you'll get real athletic.
Right.
You get my point?
Yep.
When you suffocate a soul, it struggles to get fresh air. And so paradoxically, the function of the devil and the function of the struggle is to keep you asking bigger questions and looking for the truth. And then all of a sudden you begin having enlightenment experiences, but you got to drop your biases or you cannot see what's right in front of you. And this is why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is on earth. The kingdom of heaven is before you, but men do not see it. It's right in front of you all the time.
Yeah.
Because I got news for you. There's nowhere God cannot be. That's just like
right in front of you and within you.
That's why they say God is closer than your breath.
Yeah.
I mean, God's holding every atom of you together. If it wasn't for God, there would be no soul. If there wasn't for soul, there'd be no consciousness or self. And if it wasn't for selves, there'd be no love. And if there wasn't any love, there would be no flow of energy and information through empathic and compassionate connection to self or others. So there would be no life.
Yeah.
And if there was no life, there would be no experience for God. And if there was no experience for God, then God wouldn't even want to know itself, which means this conversation wouldn't be happening, nor would anything else. And that would make for a very boring state of emptiness.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So Spirit Gym really, in a nutshell, is a process of recognizing, first and foremost, that there are higher truths, but you have to ask the right questions. And that the challenges of the life process from child to warrior to king, queen to wise man, wise woman, which is the 4 life process archetypes in Spirit Gym, is the stages of evolution, which are the stages of love's own unfolding. Sex and violence love becomes conditional love, becomes empathetic and compassionate, becomes unconditional love. So as a child, we're in a sex and violence love stage because, one, we came here by an act of sex, as all living beings do, and the whole universe is an act of sex because every single atom is sexed. Okay? It's violent because the child doesn't know that dogs bite and that fire burns and that sharp cuts, and that even mommy and daddy can be mean and hurtful, and so can brothers and sisters, and dogs bite and cats scratch. So the soul is like a genie stuffed into a bottle, and it has to wake up in this completely different material reality, and there's pain involved in waking up. So sex and violence love means the beginnings of learning to love and learning to be in a material dimension of reality. And then this conditional love stage comes with words like, I love you when, I love you if, I love you and, I love you but. So qualifiers.
Yep.
So once we learn what makes us feel loved, we realize that relationships are painful unless we find someone that agrees to those terms. And if we get into relationships without realizing what the terms are that make us feel loved and by which we can love, we end up in painful relationships. And we make the big mistake of thinking that because the sex is good, the relationships was going to be good. And this is why I say that there's good sex, but you got to put up with each other for 23 more hours. Okay? And that if you don't learn to do that, which requires that you explore values, it requires that you have a common dream together, that you are willing to, and see, love always comes with responsibility because God's got nothing to be responsible for but itself. And that's what every relationship is. It's a relationship with God. And so a child wakes up and realizes one day, I have a responsibility to love. And if I'm willing to take the responsibility, I get to experience love. And the deeper I go, the more God I realize. And, you know, you two really love each other, so you can really find God in and through each other. I tell people all the time, you don't need a church if you just have a relationship.
You don't need a church if you have a good orgasm and the only thing that can come out is, oh my God. Oh my God.
Right.
Like that's an experience of God. When, you know, you're feeling someone else's soul, their essence, like that is God.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So basically what I've said, first we dream, then we mind. Then we wake up, and then we remind ourselves of what we are, and we realize we are a co-creator, and we learn the power of our mind and our desires and our intentions. Because God is unconditional love, it is your intention, be it conscious or unconscious, that determines what you create out of the potential of God. Unconscious people make unconscious choices and have to suffer the consequences. And the pain teacher shows up to say, hey, that wasn't a very good choice. Hurts, doesn't it? Next time, let's think a little more deeply before we do that.
Yeah.
And you get a little more conscious. You fall off your bike because you forgot how to turn the brakes on when you're going down a steep hill. You don't forget the next time.
Right.
Right.
Somebody rips you off in a business deal. you don't forget the next time.
Right.
Okay? And so you get more and more conscious, and you learn the rules of co-creation, and you say, okay, if I'm going to be in a relationship with you, then we got to get clear on what are the rules by which what we create and how we create together, so that we don't torture each other.
Yeah.
And other people, because they'll react to the pain too. And so ultimately, all the wars and all the violence and all the pain is a necessary tool for awakening the spirit that falls asleep when it gets entangled in matter. And the spirit is God. And so Spirit Gym really is about learning the principles by which we wake up and how to use them. And so we can be a co-creator, but so we can learn and grow and be a little more creative each day, have a little more freedom each day, and add more life to life. Because if you really realize who and what you are, then you realize the importance of doing what you love to do. Because if you're doing what you love to do, you're making love every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then you're experiencing more God every day, because love is God. Love is the verb of God. The problem is people get caught on nouns. Look at all these religious books. They're all nouning God to death. God is this, God is that. But what about the verb? The experience of God is love itself. And if we just realize that the closest you can get to God is to love yourself and love other people and love life and love nature. And the more how do you feel? Like, if you have a day where you expressed and got to receive a lot of love, don't you feel more whole?
Oh, yeah.
Alive.
More alive?
Yeah.
Like God gets closer to you on those days. Right? But then there's days that we forget and we fall back into old patterns. And that's what Spirit Gym's all about, is saying, hey, how do you recognize when you're falling into a habit pattern that's old, that brings the pain teacher to wake you up, so you don't need to keep doing it over and over again, and you just get better. You start, you realize how powerful a mind is. A mind can make you and it can break you.
Yep.
It can create beauty and it can create disaster. That's why I say a mind makes a better tool than a master. Just like a phone makes a better tool than a master. So Spirit Gym's about learning to use your mind, understanding how manifestation actually unfolds. It's about understanding the importance of duality and how to work with duality. Because without duality, you can't have meaning. Without meaning, there's no point in any story, right? It's about understanding the nature of creation itself. It's about understanding the hero's journey, the process that we're all going through, whether we realize it or not. And realizing why a mentor is so important. Because someone who's already awakened can save you from a lot of pain.
Oh,
Yep.
so true.
Right? Someone who already knows the ropes can show you where you're likely to get burnt, cut, tortured, or lost.
Right. Well, and if these 2 hours haven't given you, the clue enough as to why we spend so much time with this guy, your proof is in the last 2 hours, right? And I just to
Felt like 10 minutes to me.
bring folks into the location of where this is happening. Like, let's say that you are a home, right? And most spiritual development, most personal development, people are reaching towards maybe teachers or curriculum or resources that will do the equivalent of putting a new siding on the house or putting a new fresh coat of paint on the exterior of the house to make it seemingly look better, feel better, and there's a shorter duration, but for a period of time, you might feel like the home has been improved. Where we are, the work that, and the conversation that we've been having for these last 2 hours, the work that we do with you, what will be embedded into the Spirit Gym program is going directly to the foundation of the home.
Yeah.
And it's saying we're at a level of principle, of first principles and first values, to use, Mark Goffney's term.
Yeah.
And we will be transforming from this foundational level such that the home itself is actually transformed into something that's new instead of just its surface, instead of just its exterior.
And realizing it's your own creation.
Right.
It's your home. If there's termites in there, they're yours.
Right.
If the sewage is all clogged up, it's your sewage.
Right.
These are metaphors you can use however you want. If your sex life is shitty, go stand in the mirror and meet the maker. If you're broke because you don't know how to manage money, go stand in the mirror and meet the maker.
Right.
Life is mirroring us back to us always.
Right.
That's the other thing. God is a living mirror. Mm-hmm. However you perceive God is how you see the world. This is why Jung warned the Imago Dei archetype is the most powerful, because all other archetypes emerge from it. So the Imago Dei, imago means image, Dei means deity. Whatever your image of deity is, influences your relationship to your mother, your father, to how you perceive the world. Every other archetype is, shall we say, stained by your perception of God. If you think God doesn't exist, you're an atheist, then you have a terribly deep, lingering question. Because as long as you think that everything is made out of matter and that your brain, a material thing, creates consciousness, you can never get over the hump of what creates matter. Right? And the problem is matter cannot organize itself. How long do you have to stand next to a pile of rocks before a toaster oven or a Rolex watch jumps out of it? Well, longer than God, in eternity, forever, because it needs an organizing intelligence, right? So there has to be an organizing intelligence that's not only creating matter, but forming matter. And that's what the word information means. The flow of energy without information doesn't know what to create. So consciousness, soul, and spirit create by putting information in formation. Mm-hmm. A square is a formation. A house is a formation. A body is in formation. You understand that? Mm-hmm. The whole created universe is made of energy, information, and frequency. There's nothing else there. The 5 Platonic solids tell you the archetypal nature of the structure of the information that creates the physical universe. Gravity is an example of a law of the electromagnetic reality of creation. But the thing I'm pointing is, and Jung pointed this out very clearly. He said, you look at someone's beliefs about God and you will see a lot about how they relate to their mother, their father, their spouse, their teachers, themselves, food, sex, money, everything, right down the line. And that's why I had to study world religion, because I found over and over again my patients' ideas about God were the most dangerous thing in their life, and it led them to a lot of illness and a lot of disease. I mean, if you want a quick example, just look at vegans and vegetarians. There's very rigid ideas about food and about animals and about nature. And those ideas become their God. And that God is so powerful that when they're protein starved, their hormonal systems are breaking down and they've got cancer, and they're sitting in my treatment room convincing me that they don't need to eat meat. And I'm saying to them, why are you here paying me $750 an hour if your health philosophy is as good as you say it is? Because this does not make sense. And I'm telling you that your body, and I just ask, I'm looking right in the eyes and say, what happens to you when you smell meat? You walk into a restaurant with some friends and you smell meat.
Their mouth probably waters.
They start to salivate and they have to go into denial. What happens when you see a nice piece of pink salmon and you haven't eaten meat in a year and you're pregnant? Your body is sending messages to your head so fucking loud, and yet you turn it into some kind of a contest to see if you can be as disciplined as it takes to say no to yourself.
I say the same thing. I think Sam Harris does the same thing with a mystical experience. I think he goes, nah, that's not God. He arm's lengths the God experience.
Of course.
And I think that's the stuck point of a lot of atheism.
Yeah. But it's great, though, because you see, God thinks this is fucking hilarious. Oh man, I mean, I've had a lot of mystical experiences and union experiences with God. I the sense of humor God has is wicked. Mm-hmm. I mean, wicked. It's like I've laughed and cried so hard that it took me days to recover because my muscles hurt so bad from laying on the floor and fucking laughing and crying in pain, but laughing. Because when you see the punchline of the joke, you realize the more pain you in, the more trapped you got in not realizing it was a joke and not realizing it's a story and it's a dance and it's an art form. You know, God is the great artist and God can burn the art. Right? Imagine being Michelangelo, making David, and saying, "Oh, fuck it," and taking a sledgehammer to it after 10 years. That's what God does. God says, "Oh, fuck, it's just a universe. I'll make another one. And I'll make it better." And it's fun. And that's why I practice stacking rocks. That's why I love to paint. I practice doing things like that so that when I make something that I really love, I can knock it down and learn to detach from it. Learn to not let my sense of attachment become what determines my own sense of worthiness or value or, you know, I won't mention too much, but out of love, I painted a painting for one of my family members. And I really was just, you know, sharing my love. And for whatever reason, I was talking to this family member after I sent him the painting. I said, I never heard back from you. I sent you this painting in the mail. It's been like 2 months. What'd you do with it? To be honest with you, I lit it on fire and burned it because I hated it.
Oh my God.
And I was shocked. But you know, the pain that rose up in me, I said, inside of myself, I knew I was in Spirit Gym right there. I said, okay, did you really give it to him? Or did you give it to him to please you? I said, right now, the pain you're feeling is because you wanted to be acknowledged. You wanted him to validate you. And the fact that he burned it is your chance to truly make it a gift. And so I ultimately just said, well, I gave it to you to do whatever you wanted to do with. I hope that was a nice warm fire. You know, but I had to breathe my way through it. See, there's Spirit Gym.
I love that you just said that. I'm in Spirit Gym.
Yeah.
Because that is like an audible or, you know, almost like a mantra that anyone can use, you know, these moments that come into our life. I feel like I'm in Spirit Gym right now with certain things that are happening in my personal life that I've never experienced before. And I haven't used that phrase before because I just, you know, I'm hearing it right now, but like reminding myself that in a year, I'm going to look back and think to myself, man, I learned so much about myself, about reality, and my relationship with Chase grew from that experience. Like, how is that a bad experience?
Yeah.
And that's when we're growing, right? And it's not just these unconscious negative circumstances that come up in our life that are, you know, putting us into the victim or child state.
Yeah, we got a couple extra plates on the bar in Spirit Gym.
Yeah.
Well,
right?
you do. Yeah. You know, that's why they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
You know, if you can just breathe through it. You know, we didn't get a lot into my childhood and all that stuff, but man, I had a fucking ball buster of a childhood.
Yeah.
So much death and so much violence. You know, my brother committed suicide because it just broke him. My stepfather was just unbelievable. You know, my dad drowned when I was 8, and that was so painful. I mean, it just hurt so bad. And to see another man touching my mother and being intimate with her, but us kids not understanding what was going on, and then to have him beating us up and beating my mother up, and you know, just so many things. And, you know, we had a large 142-acre farm. My father worked us like frickin' slave dogs, man. And so I just didn't have a childhood. I was given a lot of responsibility from the day I turned 8. Once I could reach the pedals on the tractor, it was full go, man.
And that's your son right now. That's Mana. And I can't even imagine you know, putting him in that situation where he's like, well, you got to grow up. You got to be a man at 8 right now.
Yeah. You know, my dad had hard rules. You don't eat until the animals eat. You don't, if you ever get caught eating or drinking before those animals are fed, the consequences you will never forget.
Yeah.
And they have included broken bones and other things that are too hard to tell because it would hurt the people listening. And there, for a long time, I really didn't want to be alive. Neither did my brother or my sister. And it ultimately wiped my brother out. But it led me to profound mystical experiences. Because right when I was about to crack, I started having out-of-body experiences. And that shocked me into a whole new level of realization, because real quickly I thought I was going crazy. I knew I couldn't tell my mom or dad any of this because they would probably do something stupid.
Yeah.
And so I began practicing with them, and I would practice at night when I went to bed because it was easy as I was falling asleep. I noticed that's when it first started to happen. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go look around on the farm. And I found I could just, by consciously directing what I called my spirit body, and I could actually see my light body. I could look down at myself and see myself laying in bed. And so I started going all around the farm and identifying things. And the first thing I'd do is get up in the morning and go see, oh, there's that chainsaw I saw right where I thought, oh, there's that gun. And I proved to myself somehow I'm actually leaving my body. And I realized I'm not stuck in this body. And the thing that I wanted bad was to get out of the house and to get away from my parents and just away from everybody. And so it's almost like God needed me to be under this much pressure to crack me open so that I could learn who and what I really was.
Yeah, because if you had an easy, lovely childhood, grew up in the suburbs and money was flowing in and you never had to work a day in your life, does that portion of your consciousness ever get cracked open?
No,
Who
and that's
knows?
why pain is here, and that's why the devil's here. Because one of the functions of the devil is to keep you from having so much fun that you forget to grow.
Yeah. And if that portion of your consciousness never opens up, do you become, a world-renowned therapist for people all over the world? Are you able to have the impact that you are having in the world now? Like, maybe in a different route, but certainly not this route.
There's always pain. I mean, and it's always relative, I've worked with, as I said, a lot of very wealthy people that were spoon-fed from childhood. But the soul's the only thing that can satiate the soul is unconditional love. Because that's what it is, right? It is God's love. So someone raised in a silver spoon family always has some relative deficit. It might be that mommy and daddy gave them lots of toys but not much attention.
Right.
It could be challenges with siblings. It can be challenges with people at school. I mean, you understand, like, what I went through is what my soul brought me here to go through. And I asked my soul later in my life, why did I have to go through this? It was I barely made it. And my soul said to me, you needed to have enough experience of the things that hurt most people to understand them and have empathy for them as a therapist.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't really know how real these things are, you'd have never been able to connect to them.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have been able to have empathy and compassion for them. And so my soul told me I had to go through the school of hard knocks to learn how to get out of it, how to lead people out of, the old saying, Carl Jung says, no tree can grow to heaven until its roots reach to hell. And so I had to build roots into hell so I could really be clear on how to get to heaven. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I'll tell you what, and I needed to be strong because to pioneer all the stuff I've been attacked constantly throughout my career. I started, rocking the industry in 1988. I brought the Swiss ball in and taught people how to do that, and then people attacked me for that and told me I was a fag and constantly attacking me, and there's too many things that I've pioneered into sit here. I don't want to sound like an egomaniac, but I've been attacked all the way, and I realized if it wasn't for the fact that my father made me fucking tough and taught me, one thing my dad did is he taught me how to think. He said, if something broke down, like a baler or whatever,
you got to be a good problem solver.
My dad would say, I'll be back in 4 hours. It better be fucking fixed. And that meant, I don't care if you have to beg, borrow, steal, go to the neighbors, go to a library.
Get it done.
Get the fucking thing fixed or it'll hurt you so bad you'll get it right soon. And he meant it. And I learned. And my stepfather, as much of a badass as he was and who had no clue, he thought children were animals. He was a special effects man for Universal Studios. He was super smart. He was capable of fixing and making almost anything. I mean, this guy he was a master builder. He could he could do everything. He was an underwater welder. He was a smoke jumper for the Los Angeles Fire Department. He was a professional rodeo rider. Wow. He was the best shot I've ever known in my life, a master hunter. You would not want this guy hunting you. He was like a frickin' Green Beret. And so I got to be around a person who had tremendous practical knowledge, a very good farmer, knew a lot about veterinary medicine and animal husbandry. We had a big farm, a lot of animals, a lot of shit goes down on a farm. My mother was, she's a master sculptor. I mean, you can see her work behind you. My mom's a masterful craftswoman, a great cook. She had a lot of skills as well. She's very holistic. She became a yogi, and so my mom brought the spiritual into my family, and my father brought the shut the fuck up and get working, or I'll kill you, period. And he forced us to think, and he forced us to be productive. I mean, I remember being in basic training and in the 82nd Airborne Division in jump school, and guys are like dropping like flies all around me and trying to commit suicide because the stress is so much. And I'm like, you wankers wouldn't last one day on the farm with my father, man. This is like a party for me. I'm fucking getting fat here. I'm gaining weight. I'm getting out of shape. Right? Try bucking 3,000 bales of friggin' hay. And when your hands are bleeding, try swinging a goddamn axe for 8 hours a friggin' day and knowing if you stop for 10 seconds to rest, you're going to get hit in the head. I mean, by the time I was, left home at 16, I was frickin' steel. And I used to get jobs all the time working with grown men, and the owners of companies would say, they would use me as a tool. They're like, this guy's 16, he's kicking your ass. And it used to upset people because they would use me as leverage, but I would outwork full grown. When I was a faller in a logging camp, we have to do what's called a piece count. Every time you fall a tree, so say you fall 150-foot Douglas fir and you buck it into lengths, because we get told by the foreman every day because they need certain types of wood for the sawmills. So you do a piece count. So at the end of the day, I might have 167 pieces, So all the loggers get together and, it's like showing your dick off. How many pieces you get today? I would kill them. In fact, it was so bad, it was making all the senior fallers jealous. And finally, one of the ones that befriended me, Marcel Granger, real cool guy. He was like 65 years old on his kind of last legs after falling trees for 30 years. Very dangerous work, very hard work. Climbing the sides of mountains all day in rough weather and everything else, carrying gas, fuel, chainsaw, axe.
Jesus.
But I was built for that. And Marcel said to me when he said, Paul, you need to slow down. He said, you got to stop cutting so much wood because you're making everybody look bad. And one of these days, someone's going to give you a blanket party, which means they come to you when you're asleep at night and beat the shit out of you.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's how they handle guys they don't like. And they did the same thing in the Army. And that was like, I couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm like, I work on your fucking team. I work for the same company you do. We get paid for getting wood out of the goddamn forest. I mean, you're telling me not to do my job as well. And I could never understand this mentality. But the point is, by the time I left my farm, my father's farm, like I could go without food. I could work freezing cold. I could work bleeding. It didn't fucking matter. And so when I got into the military, I was winning contests left, right, and center. I'm like, it was just like, this is like great. Everybody's telling me how great I am. And I never heard that from my father ever. I just heard, shut the fuck up and do better, do more, go faster, go harder. And so, it's trippy how you look back on your life and you realize, like I realized, and I'm sure some of you people out there listening have, that all of a sudden you see a golden thread connecting all the parts of your life together. Like if I hadn't have been raised like this, I wouldn't have been strong enough to make the journey. If I hadn't have had a tough mind, I wouldn't have, the criticism of me would have collapsed me.
Yeah.
I would have been too afraid to be a pioneer. If I hadn't have been honest about, like, monogamy just wasn't for me as a young man. And 17 years of marriage, I made a promise to myself, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's not who I am. I don't want to be in a relationship where I feel like I got to have sex with someone else and I have to hide it because God's going to burn me in hell, or because I'm cheating on my wife, who I don't want to cheat on people I love. So I'm just going to put it on the fucking table. And if it works, great. It's good for everybody. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I never asked a woman for something I wouldn't give back. And so the point is, when I look back on my life, I see how everything gave me the pieces of the puzzle that I needed, so that when I finally figured out why I was here on the planet, I would realize there was a guiding intelligence behind it all. And that's one of the most important things for healing, is realizing that God's been there with you the whole time. And that God is your soul guiding you, and it's many other souls guiding you, and that you have been shaped, but you also have the free will to resist it. You can abort your mission. You can say no to your love. Like when I had to do jobs for money to keep my family, my son was born when I just turned 18, but none of my parents didn't have any money. Her parents had no money. I had no choice. So I had to do a lot of hard frickin' jobs, which I could tell you many of them, but I had the strength to do it, and I kept looking for better jobs. But then I'll never forget when I was first working as a therapist, and people would make comments to me like, Paul, you are the only one that can explain things to me in a way that I can understand. How is it that, I go to all these doctors and therapists and I just get lost and confused, but in 5 minutes you've explained to me what I've been asking them for a year to understand. And I would say, well, I've got a knowledge of hydraulics. I went to school to be a mechanic, and I used to build race cars, and I worked with a lot of hydraulic systems, and you're a plumber. And this guy, he's an electrician. Well, I know about electronics too. I actually I worked in Army aviation. I spent a year in electronics school. So you see, I know about farming. I know about sports. I studied anatomy and physiology. So if you're a hairdresser, I can help you understand what's wrong with you from your language. If you're a carpenter, I'll tell you about the body that way. So I saw all these dots connect. And I saw if I had hit the jackpot too soon and stopped looking, I wouldn't have had to go through all these different ways of relating and learning and understanding, and I would have never been a good therapist because I would have been too narrow. And if I hadn't been hurt enough, I would have just thought everybody was a whiner.
Yeah.
Right. And if you would have gone through the classical education system.
Well, I hated that.
Right.
That was like going to church. It's like, okay, I'm getting told to shut up because I'm asking questions, and I'm asking important questions. Like, what's the point of going to school if you can't ask questions? I mean, isn't that what a teacher's supposed to be for? So I'm like, okay, I was in the 10th grade for about a month, and I said, I just can't take this anymore. And I left. Yeah. And it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
And everyone you've ever served, because you're able to think outside the box. There was never any, educational box completely set in place like, most of the rest of us.
I mean, I will speak for both of us to say that, studying with you, studying from you, it's, the traditional education is left to right, top to bottom.
Yeah.
And it's a memorizing practice and a regurgitation practice.
Yes, it is.
That rarely, outside of for a very select few, sinks past surface level.
Can you get the right answer on the test?
Paul is surgical, and even if I'm not grasping what you have to say in the moment, you are crafting the space and the container for my car to ultimately pull into that slip when the time is right.
I'm taking people on a journey.
There's a
Yeah.
recognition
Yeah.
so that even if I'm not grasping it with my mind,
Yeah.
my soul recognizes what you have to say as familiar and important. And I'm literally on the hook until my brain catches up.
Yeah.
And those moments, just, speaking to everybody listening, those moments when your mind catches up to what Paul supports the curation of, which is this, this metaphorical parking space, that when your car finally pulls into that spot, it's light bulb. It's a freaking light bulb moment.
Yeah, that's the goal.
And I'm just so excited for people to get a
Yeah.
chance to step into this domain. And talking about timing, right? Like, you've been putting decades of your life, and I've seen it firsthand from you and your family, and from VHS to where
Yeah.
we're at now, this digital virtual world.
I got lots of VHS tapes
to
with me on them.
to know that we're now able and available to work with you and
Yeah.
learn from you in this digital virtual format. Thank God it's 2024, and I rarely say that.
Yeah.
But we have an opportunity to really, really reach so many lives.
Yeah.
To just get even just a fraction of this wisdom, and so.
Yeah, well, Spirit Gym is, for me, look, we've tried top-down movements to heal the planet and heal the
Yeah.
problems of culture and religion and business and medicine.
Yeah. Meaning, like, let's elect a different leader and maybe things will change.
Yeah, from the smart people with all the degrees down.
Yeah.
It's never worked. They ruined our farming system. They ruined our education system. They ruined our medical system. Why? Because it always turns into a profiteering adventure,
Right.
which means you got to control the way people think to get them to do what you want them to do, to buy what you want them to buy. And so far, we've turned the whole world into a commodity, and now we're about sold out, right? And so it's time for me. I just said, look, I can't sit by and watch this. I have enough knowledge to say I know how nature works. I understand people. I understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I also understand, as I've just shared for a couple of hours, how the devil has to be involved. But when you finally see the devil, you got to say, okay, do I want to keep feeding that thing? There's the old saying, the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know, because you can do something with that one.
Yeah.
And so now that we know where the devils are, we got to stop feeding them, whether they be
Right.
mental devils, emotional devils, or physical devils. And Spirit Gym is really say, hey, let's learn how to work with these forces, because actually they're inherent within all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of us has a killer inside of us. Every one of us eats. Every one of us gets horny unless you're sick, right? Like, as good looking as you are, I guarantee you, as someone as beautiful as you walks by, there's a part of him that says, yummy. And then you find out the level of love as commitment and love as responsibility, right? And if you two agree together, then 2 pounds. And next thing you know, you might be where I'm at with 2 wives. You never know what will happen, right? But you see, the point I'm making is all of us have got to deal with the responsibility of love. And if you don't take the responsibility of love, then you ultimately have to find out what happens when you don't.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? It looks like women getting pregnant and daddy taking off because he's not willing to be responsible, and leaving a woman with a child, and the pain that they have to go through, and the broken family and the effect on the child. And so if you keep doing that long enough, generation after generation, guess what you get? This. Right here, right now. We're in it. You keep avoiding the responsibilities of taking care of the soil, you ruin yourself.
Yeah.
You avoid responsibility for the environment, you destroy what feeds you. You avoid the responsibility for moral and ethical business management, and you have everybody ripping everybody else off. You got criminals all around you, right? You avoid the responsibility to be honest about what God really is, and put it into a packaged control system so you can mess with people's heads. You get war. And so I just said, I cannot sit idly. Like, I wrote my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, 20 years ago, because as a therapist with, by that time, 20 years of experience, I'm like, why do I have to wait till people are sick and broken to come learn what everybody should have learned in elementary school and high school about how to take care of a body? And I'm just doing the same thing now, except I'm saying, okay, I got the body covered. Now let's look at the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. Because if you don't have those right, your body's never going to be in a state of harmony.
Yeah.
And I just can't wait any longer because none of us can.
Right.
Right.
So, Paul, when someone signs up for Spirit Gym, they join Spirit Gym, what can they expect?
Well, what we're going to do is, as I've created, the master key, which you've read, I've got it right here. That is as finely synthesized as I can take. Remember, the Spirit Gym series is 15 books for around 3,000 pages. And so I broke it up into 15 volumes because each chapter has a workbook section so you can apply it. So I show you how to apply the teachings. So it's going to take us probably the next year to a year and a half to publish all 15 books. The volume 1's coming out very soon now, right around the time of the first Spirit Gym meeting. So our first meeting is July the 1st. So the members, when they sign up, become part of the Spirit Gym community, and they have access to the Master Key lessons. I created 63 video online lessons that take you through exactly the principles, the 10 principles of Spirit Gym, and how to live them, and show you how people get trapped, and how to use your mind effectively. So it covers all the 10 principles basically, and so you go through those lessons, and each meeting every week, I devote an hour to me giving a presentation, most of which will come out of the lessons so that people can hear it from me and ask questions. So people can ask me questions about anything based on what I'm talking about for the first hour. And I will have guest mentors come in that are, very wise people on different topics so that it's not all just, me talking, and we can get different perspectives. And then after the first hour is done, then I have 60 to 90 minutes where anyone in the audience can ask me any question about anything, be it the lessons, challenges they're having in their life, how to dream better, whatever, health problems, relationship problems. I've spent 41 years dealing with people's problems, so it's pretty natural for me. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is I have all the key diagrams from Spirit Gym and all the principles. So I answer their problems and help them solve them problems by using the same tools that I've given them in Spirit Gym. So everyone gets to watch and listen. So if Mimi says, Paul, I'm having menstrual cycle problems, and I ask you a few key questions, you give me the answers, and I say, okay, here's what I need you to do. And they get to watch. So every woman in the crowd that's got menstrual problems learns about how to deal with that. Chase says, I'm having a hard time feeling passionate about my career. What do I do? And so I ask key questions. You give the answers, and everyone's in that boat. They learn. So each week, we all learn how to apply the principles from all sorts of different life situations. And over the my career, I found people move in soul groups. Mm-hmm. So when you've been there yourself in my workshops,
Yep.
I say, you probably think that you're the only one that I'm talking just to you. How many of you in the class right now you're going through a divorce? How many of you are going through a divorce or are still in pain because of the one you went through recently? And 15 hands go up. So ultimately, it's to create a grassroots movement where we apply these principles and we learn how to use them just like you learn how to do math or how to bake or drive a car, except you now relegate the practices of how do you address the issues of life through these principles so you know how to respond with the intention of creating more freedom in your life, learning to use your powers of manifestation, and learning to inspire others to know that God is in them and they have the power to co-create so that they can actually take responsibility for being a co-author of the story and inspire others to do the same and get clear on what we all need together. So just an overview of the principles, the principle of the one being. How does that relate to your life? See, for example, if you realize the principle of the one and that you're inherently part of the whole, how can you possibly be alone? Right? The mountains are the mountains of you. The moon is the moon of you. The sun is the sun of you. I'm a remote viewer. If there was if that wasn't true, how in the world could Paul, sitting in his chair, go tell you what's on the sun or the moon or anywhere I wanted to go? And I've proven this objectively. I won't go into how, but I've found lost people nobody could find. I won a remote viewing contest with 750 people, and I've proven over and over again. And as a remote viewer, when I say, how is that possible? It's only possible if the body or the sense of self is an illusion that allows us to create love and experience otherness and place in time so we can have an experience. Remember, if there wasn't time, everything would happen at once and you couldn't make heads or tails of it. So the sense of self and the sense of time give us this necessary illusion of separation so we can have an experience. The principle of the two is duality. How do you work with duality to create positively, and you learn how a mind works and use it. The principle of the three is the principle of the Holy Trinity, which is how spirit manifests, how dreaming manifests. So how do you use these principles to create what you want in your own life? The principle of the four, said simply, is the principle of embodiment, and it has to do with earth, water, fire, and air. The alchemist's approach to understanding the elements, how they work, how they create, how spirit is involved. And there's many principles of the four, like the four doctors, so that's a principle of the four, so that's life management. The principle of Om, A-U-M _, which is how creation unfolds in cycles and how it's involved in all aspects of your life. Then CHEK Life Process Alchemy is based on the four elements, so I show you how to use my alchemy system to solve problems, heal, create. Then there's more principles of the four, but there's the principle of the five, which is how do you get past the challenge point in any situation, a process, and what are the 5 program design factors you have to be aware of whenever you're designing a program for your own health or an exercise program or an education program, or wherever there's a process. You have to understand these 5 key factors, because if you overlook any of them, it's doomed to fail. For example, the first principle of the 5 is willingness. So if you say, I want to start a new business, but your willingness is not very high, then you're probably not going to be very successful, and you may never go through the work to start a business. So I call that qualifying your dream. If you're not at least a 7 out of 10 and your heart is not in it, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons, or you're doing it to please someone else, or you're doing it as a habit, or you're doing it as an unconscious thing that you think you got to do to either make money or make somebody else happy. So willingness is number 1 of the 5 key program design factors. They are time, willingness, time, energy, resources, and finances. So if you start something and you don't have the time to do it, you won't finish it. If you don't have the resources, you won't finish. If you don't have the finances, it's not going to happen. And if you don't have the energy, that's another one. So if you don't have the energy to do it, it won't happen. So I show you how to apply those things. 6 is the 6 foundation principles: nutrition, hydration, sleep, feminine, breathing, thinking, movement, masculine. And what do you need to know about each of those 6 foundation principles that you can keep yourself healthy and participate in your love relationships, have enough energy to be responsible. 7 is the principle of the 7 chakras and the soul. So I explain what the spirit is, what the soul is, and how spirit, the invisible, interfaces with the physical, and how the mind and the soul and spirit work together to manifest you in your life. 8 is the principle of self-reflection. And so that's how do you use meditation, introspection, self-reflection, and say, okay, what is my dream and how well am I doing at creating that, and where could I do better at loving myself, loving others, and creating wholeness in my life, and being honest with myself and creating freedom. Because if we don't hold ourselves accountable, we'll probably never trust anybody else doing it. You know, if we can't tell ourselves the truth, it won't matter what someone else tells us. Because if you doubt yourself, you're going to doubt everybody else. Because you're the basis of truth. In other words, there's no truth higher than your own. No matter how much truth I have, if you don't believe it, then it's not truthful to you. So someone who deceives themselves lives in deception because they're perceiving through the lens of deception. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Principle of the 9 is, now that I'm at a new level of awareness, like I've got my practices, how do I keep from falling off the wagon so that I become that person? How do I embody it as what I'm creating, be it my own healing or my own business or my own dream? 10 is, now that I have finished this cycle of the hero's journey, how do I go into the redreaming process and decide what is it that I want to use my authorship to co-create for myself, for my family, for my friends, and for the world? And so those are the 10 principles. 0, God. 1, being. 2, duality. 3, the Holy Trinity or manifestation. 4, embodiment. 5, the process and how to go through it properly. 6, foundation principles. 7, what is the spirit, what is the soul, and why am I here, and how does this all keep happening? 8, how to do self-reflection and introspection for honest personal development. 9, how do I not fall off the wagon and fall into the trap of my addictions and my bad habits? And 10, now that I've proven to myself I'm a creator, what am I going to do next? And so we just practice those things together, and we learn and grow together. And while you can go through the lessons at your own pace, and while I'm teaching everybody, I will put new lessons out. So there'll be I created what's called the Spirit Gym University, which holds all these lessons, and I will keep adding them. And so the members have access to those lessons, no matter how much I put on there. And so as I go deeper into the book series, the main body of lessons, the Master Key lessons, are just what I consider foundation training. So then I'll get deeper into all of these issues and into other issues, such as, how do you express your potential as a creative person, whether that be dance, whether that be art, whether that be making love. It's an infinite amount that can go in there, because life is very complicated and rich, and there's many aspects to it. We got, how do we grow in relationships, and, how do we contribute to the world? And, we've got philosophical issues. What is evil? What is good? In other words, it's an ongoing process. So Spirit Gym will be forever growing. And I set it up so that people on the outside that don't want to be a member or can't afford to be a member can buy lessons as you would buy an educational product from any online education system. And there's going to be a store with various things like books and audios and videos and merchandise and products that I believe in. And there's a community so that all the Spirit Gym practitioners can support each other and share. Like if you video yourself doing an exotic dance that just came out of your heart, you can say, this is me sharing my love with all of you through dance. This is God dancing. And if someone likes to share their painting, or they share their pain and their challenges and say, hey, look, my wife just told me she wants a divorce. I'm brokenhearted. Can any of you give me some support? So it's really, I want to create a community that honors that we're all together, that we're all God expressing itself as individuality, and a place where you don't have to deal with religious dogma, but you can really be a spiritual person. But if you are in a religious dogma, I make room for that too. I say, look, you don't have to agree with anything I say. I start the lessons by saying, you do not need to agree with me, but pay close attention to where you don't, and write it down, because you're identifying the polarities of your own myth. You understand? We each have our own story. There's no two Christians alike. There's no two Muslims alike. They all have their own interpretation of that story. So really what Spirit Gym is, a metamith. It's a container for all stories. So I'm teaching you the principles that have to be understood to manifest and live a story without it causing more pain than freedom. And so it doesn't matter if you're a hardcore Christian. I'll just say, how's that working for you? Because if you feel in touch with God and you feel loved and you feel supported, there's no need to fix it.
Right.
Your urge to fix it or grow it or alter it or take over more authorship will come when you realize that it's limiting you in some way. And you will be surrounded by people that have evolved past that point to guide you and hold your hand as you climb the ladder of consciousness. So that's really what Spirit Gym is all about. It's about people that truly want to share with each other, learn from each other, grow, and make room for each other, and love and support each other, and realize that God says yes to everything. The question is, are you willing to take responsibility for what you're creating? Which is where the old saying prays, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it.
Yeah.
You know, and so Spirit Gym is saying, be conscious of what it is that you're manifesting, and learn to work with your unconscious, because its power to create is far more than your conscious mind can even grapple with. So that's where we got to get into shadow healing and looking into ourselves. So I have lessons to take you through this whole process. I took everything that I do with my personal clients, even the most rich and famous that can afford to work with me, like Jason Picard. He's a very wealthy man, but he's worked with me for 15 years now, and he's been through a lot with me, and we've, you know, gone into his unconscious, and many of my clients have gone through this. So, and you know, you see the testimonials are coming from a lot of them. A lot of my advanced students have worked with me for a long time. Matt Walden, the director of education, has been my student and the director of education for 27 years. And this is not your average guy. I mean, he's a naturopathic physician, an osteopathic physician, a very successful author, a professional speaker, a very accomplished man. So, you know, the Spirit Gym community is full of people that have got the willingness to wake up, clean up, grow up, show up, and do this grassroots movement. And so I just wanted to create a safe place where people could really be honest with themselves and learn principles. Like, you know, these are principles. These are not laws. Like, you know, you can use it however you want to use it. And because they're based on the principles of story, the story we're all telling ourselves and the story God's telling itself, they're really the principles you got to understand to, you know, write your story better every day, and know that you're co-creating with everybody else, because a story with no characters in it is not much of a story.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really kind of a great opportunity to get a good look at what's going on all the time. And it's so obvious. Like, I mean, you guys read it. I mean, was there anything in there that you didn't say, well, yeah, that's true?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying to you, guess what? You don't actually breathe.
Yeah.
It's an illusion.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not saying, you know, you shouldn't eat food.
Yeah.
I mean, everything in there is just, it's really like, it's like common sense.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
It is.
I've noticed that over the last 5 years or whatever it is now that we've known you and worked with you and come to your workshops and been your friend, like, working with you is like a series of a million truisms or truths like clicking into place. So when you hear it, it's not like oh my gosh, my whole reality is turned upside down and what am I going to... It's very much like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that something just clicked. Even if I can't...
experiential knowledge.
Yes, it's experiential. And something just clicked inside of me. I don't know if I would be able to even articulate it or teach it to someone else yet, but something clicked inside of me when you said that, or when I heard you give that analogy or that metaphor or whatever it is. And this has been 5 years of that happening.
And one consistent thing that I've observed in others and myself, but we've had the fortune of meeting many of your clients. Yeah. Some of them have become dear friends of ours. Yeah. Our listeners will know Jason. Our listeners will know Greg Schmaus. Jared Picard. They'll know, Nathan Riley,
Steve,
who's worked
Panico.
with you, Steve.
Yeah.
And a consistent theme is that they may have come to you as a successful businessman, trying to maybe fine-tune certain components, or a successful athlete with trouble issues, and they actually come out as themselves even more. They transcend the identity that they come to you with. Like, if you meet Jason, you see a shining spiritual beacon of light.
Yeah.
It took me weeks to realize this man was, one of the most successful Wall Street traders of all time.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow, this is someone that Paul taught to be a shaman. And I had no idea that he was a trader, because he exudes this spiritual abundance.
Yeah.
And it's just a testament to what will arguably be the most important decision that so many of these people are going to make to join Spirit Gym of their life.
Yeah.
I will attest to it myself. My life is transformed. I have transcended the identities that I brought to Paul Chek 5 years ago as wanting to fine tune, and stepped into chaseism.
Well, that's the secret. And, see, this is the thing. A lot of people accuse me of running a cult, but I don't consider myself successful if I don't actually train you to not need me.
Right.
All my patients, I've never wanted them to need me. I don't want to rub your neck when you can rub your own neck. I want to do the things for you that you can't do, and I want to teach you the things that you can do. The entire purpose of Spirit Gym is to create authentic autonomy, a spiritual awakening, and give people the tools to take responsibility for their manifestation powers, their mind, their emotions, and their relationships, and have the tools to say, okay, if my life is shitty right now, I got to look at my 50% of every relationship. How many people walk around after the third marriage saying there's no good men or there's no good women, and it's just always somebody else's fault?
Right.
How long can you go before you finally just stand in front of the mirror and get it, right?
Right.
And I don't want children. I got 3. I don't want to control people.
Right.
It's not fulfilling to me at all. My goal with Spirit Gym is to hand you a set of tools and show you how to use them, and say, I don't want to have to build everybody's house. I want to say, here's your saw, here's your hammer, here's your measuring tape, here's your triangle, here's your level, here's your string. Go build your house.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if you don't like it, go stand in the mirror and meet the carpenter. That's what I'm trying to do. I have zero interest. We don't need more children in the world, and I don't want to be a daddy. I'm going to say, look, I've learned from the school of hard knocks. I've learned from the school of blood, sweat, and tears. And my job, if you hire me as a mentor, is to teach you how to have less pain than I had, less tears than I had, more joy than I had because I didn't know any better, and share that with everybody, right? I want to see us back in love with nature, and realize she is the mother of our bodies. She is our home. It's a long way to another planet. We got to be very careful not to destroy this thing, and we're very close, and we've got to get back to some of our deeper roots of really loving and respecting each of the beings of nature as intelligences that are there to help teach us, not just for our consumption. I want people to understand reciprocity, redistribution, relationship, and responsibility. I want them to understand the nature of love. I want them to understand why relationships are so important and how to work in a relationship. What's the importance of values? What's the importance of having a dream or goals together so that you actually have a fulfilling life with somebody? And how important are kids? They're brutally important, but they're getting destroyed by what we've got going on. I mean, I've got a book in my library that's probably 500 pages, written by a very skilled psychologist in the 1960s. And it's case after case of all the people with mental disorders that he tracked right back to religious dogmas and beliefs that were destroying them. And he says right in there, as a professional psychologist with a lot of experience, I think it should be mandatory that nobody's allowed to read the Bible till they're 18 years of age, because the damage it does to children's minds. And I agree. I've seen this over and over again. Reading the Bible is one thing, but reading it and understanding what you're reading and how to put it into context and look for the allegorical, look for the inspirational, and say, wow, this is how people used to believe that way. This is the kind of problems they got in trouble with. And how do we not make those mistakes again instead of repeating them like Groundhog Day, which we can't afford to do anymore, you know? I want people to understand what religion really is. And it's not memorization of stuff written in books by other people. Real religion is having your own relationship with the God that lives inside of you and lives inside of everybody around you and lives in the trees and lives in the birds and the bees. And loving and respecting that, because what we call the universe is God's body. Mm-hmm. You're walking on God. You sleep on God. The car you drive is made of God. We've got to realize that God's not some father figure in the sky somewhere out there. You don't have to go looking for God. Mm-hmm. It's in you and it's around you. And that is a completely different way of relating to God. And when you relate to God that way, then God is in the dog, and God is in the cow, and God is in the microorganisms in the soil. And we have to say, how do we love the garden better because it's our home? You know, I think it's just important for us all to grow up, really, put it simply. Mm-hmm. It's time to grow up and stop waiting for somebody else to rescue us and fix us all the time. Look, I had to do this myself, and I'm glad I did. And I'm glad I've been able to help thousands of people, because I know for sure it works, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. You guys wouldn't even be, you're too smart to come to my workshops and classes and all that stuff if it wasn't actually real.
Right.
I mean, oh my God, you wouldn't have spent all that. I'm not a cheap date. Even my workshops are not cheap. I do that because I don't want looky-loos. I want people to invest in themselves, and I value my time. But I'm not the kind of guy that you come back to twice unless you're just an idiot and got money to throw away, and you might as well just go do drugs. It's more fun than me. So that's it, really. It's just something I just had to do. Yeah. I can't watch the world fall apart. Yeah. I'm so tired of seeing people being tricked by medical fallacies and government bullshit and experts that teach health but aren't healthy, and gurus that aren't gurus, and we how far can we go? I mean, our children are our future, and the kids are in the worst shape they've ever been. And if we don't do something now, there's not going to be a future. Not here.
The time is now. And if you're listening, and I'm sure of it, you have felt the nudge today. You have felt something inside that resonates, that calls to this. And if you want to step into being a better father or mother or lover, or maybe you're alone and you're
looking for community,
deeply looking for community and reflection and a mentor and a space to really take back some level of autonomy in this life that is consistently offering you flotation devices to get through the chaos. Well, that's a complete fallacy. This life is about learning how to swim. Yeah. And Spirit Gym is the place where we'll learn how to tread some water.
It's a big swimming pool with lifeguards.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yep. You know.
I'm so excited for everybody. I encourage heavily encourage our listeners and our community to participate with us. We'll be in it, and jump into the deep end with all of us and Mr. Paul Chek, because this will be transformative.
You can go to myspiritgym.com, and it's named that for a reason. It's not Paul's Spirit Gym, it's yours.
Yeah,
so
love that.
Everyone that's in there, it's their Spirit Gym, right? Mm-hmm. It's not me writing your story. It's not me that's got to live your life. So I'm teaching the principles, and you're in, it's your Spirit Gym. Yeah. You know? It's like Hotel California. Once you get in, you can never leave. You can get access to the master key, and it gives you the synthesis of all 15 volumes in 20 pages of.
And that's a free gift that you offer people.
It's free. Right? Yeah, so you can look at it and say, "Is this for me?"
Yeah.
You know, I don't want anybody in that doesn't want to be in there.
Right.
And neither will the community.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, you know, if you're ready to really go on an exploration for yourself, with yourself, and have friends that are doing the same thing, that's what Spirit Gym's all about.
I'm so excited. And I'm so excited for you too. Like, we've, gotten to see glimpses and just been around you and seeing the the passion and excitement that you've put into this. And just like every time we see you, like, oh, you guys, I got to show you this. I got to tell you about this. And like, it just seeps out from your pores. And I'm so excited for you to be giving birth to this very big baby.
Me too, because man, I'll tell you what, being 9 months pregnant for 4 years is hard.
Yeah, I'm just so excited for everybody involved, and no one more than just you to have this out. And I'm so honored that we get to have this conversation with you and to share it with our listeners, and that we're going to be inside learning and being and growing alongside everyone.
Yeah, it's fun, It's better to cry with people. It's better to celebrate with people. It's better to make love with people.
It's better to laugh with people.
Yeah. If there's one thing that really has kept me in my career for over 40 years is that there's a lot of things I could do to make money, and lots of money. And I've had a lot of opportunities to make a lot of money doing other things. But I always knew that I felt the most whole inside when I was helping other people live their dreams. When I could help someone get out of pain so they could go, mother and play with their kids, or, make a living, or, score more goals or win a championship. That's always been what made my heart feel full. And so really, this is what I decided I needed to do for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be seeing private clients anymore, because I feel like I can't really take my knowledge and my life's work and really maximize it one person at a time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share the principles and practices that I've used to help thousands and thousands of people consistently get better, from the greatest athletes in the world to the movies and the movie stars and rock people and music people, to housewives and field workers across the board, and just do it together and start a movement. I hope Spirit Gym spreads around the globe. And it's not because I'm in it for the money. It's because I'm in it for life. I'm in it for my kids. I'm in it for your future children. I'm in it because I ask you a question. If we don't wake up, clean up, grow up, and show up right quick, what is the future going to look like?
Not pretty.
I mean, hell, you got two of the three people running for president that are the last people in the world you want giving access to nuclear weapons. Right. Like, this is very dangerous, and so we've got to start a grassroots movement. At least I know when I die that I did my best. So.
Thank you so much, Paul. We love you.
Love you too.
The bottom of our hearts.
We love you so much.
I always love having you here. It's always great. My kids love you too, and
they're so awesome.
Angie and Penny do, and the animals do, and the paints do, and the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees.
Such home for us, and
it is.
And I'm so excited to have everybody joining with us and experiencing Paul and Spirit Gym. So myspiritgym.com. If anybody has any questions for Mimi and I about the program, about working with Paul, we're happy to share. So reach out to us directly. And I'm so excited to have the medicine listeners with us.
Awesome. Thank you, all of you. And thank you to all you listeners. If you've put up with me this long, you got a fighting chance in Spirit Gym.
Yeah. All right, you guys, thanks for listening. Check the show notes for all of the links, and we will talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.